Hello, doggo. How are you? Oh my god. I didn't mean to do that so I can hear myself. Let me quickly pull the video. You've been waiting? I try to wait a little bit just to make sure you're up and don't have to be too late. But I could have streamed a little bit earlier. I mean, I've been up since 5 a.m. What were you on, the 30th? Or did you watch that one? Let's see. Did we watch this one? No, we didn't watch this one. So we are on currently the 30th episode. Woke up early. I woke up pretty early today too. 1 second. Alright, oh, I forgot, you can't see the screen. Make sure you can see the screen, and I need to fix the chat. And boom. There we go. Alright, you ready, doggo?
Dear Scott Cawthon, why am I here? We all know my hatred of your games, not that they're not, like, cool. And in fact, I love the lore in the story so much that I obsessively read the wikis and watch Let's Plays, Matt's breakdowns on the lore. I love solving puzzles, but I hate visits to the hospital. And Lord Almighty, playing your games nearly gives me a heart attack every freaking time. But I have an idea about this. Just hear me out. An anxious person's edition for every game you've ever made, where you have to solve all the exact same puzzles in the exact same way, but instead of like a jump scare as a lose condition, a gentle unicorn narrated by Morgan Freeman shows up and says, "Aw, shucks, pal, looks like you messed up. Would you like to give it another try? I believe in you." Anyway,
no, because I think that'd make people so mad. Just Morgan Freeman trying to say, "Oh, you'll get it next time." I'd be like, Morgan Freeman, get off my screen! And be getting so mad.
Recently, while playing through the series again because I hate myself and never want to sleep again, I hit sister location, and something stood out as super strange to me, and now my sleepless nights have been spent poring over the weird implications of what may be one of the strangest endings to any video game ever, which is this. How on earth do you make a walking skin suit out of a human being? Get out of here, Buffalo Bill! Nobody asked your opinion! Okay, for those of you who don't know, the ending of Sister Location is pretty dark. There are two endings, the bad one and the other bad one, both of which essentially end the same way. The main antagonist, Eddard, dang it, not Eddard, Ennard. Sorry, Mr. Stark. Anyway, Ennard, a hybrid animatronic containing the hive minds of Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, Circus Baby, and Ballora, and I think that's all of them. Anyway, Ennard lures you into a not at all suspicious sounding scooping room where they confess to you that this has all been a plot to escape captivity and Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. Their big plan revolves around using the scooper to scoop you out and then wear your body like a suit so they can escape without being recaptured. Brilliant plan! The other ending gives you a false sense of security wherein you can avoid being lured to the scooping room and escape Ennard's clutches and, in theory, survive. However, Ennard follows you back home, and in a post-credits scene you see that, hey, doesn't matter what you do because Ennard has a skin sona and they're gonna get their skin suit no matter what you have to say on the matter. And if this were it, if this were all I had to go on, I'd just be like, gross, and then I'd move on. But that's not all I have to go on, because Scott Cawthon later released the custom night, which allowed you to play several more nights of Sister Location that were even harder. Thanks for that one, pal. The nights themselves are non-canon, but when you beat them, you're rewarded with a minigame that is canon. In this minigame, you watch Eggs Benedict, aka the player character, aka Michael Afton, walking down the street. It is a beautiful day outside, birds are singing, flowers are blooming, and on days like these, kids like you should be rotting! Oh my god, you're rotting! That's so gross! In a series of 7 cutscenes, we see the body of Michael Afton getting progressively more discolored and disfigured, all of which culminates in a final scene where this bloated and...
Once I'm done with watching all 103, I'll be playing FNAF. But that
broken body staggers to a halt and vomits up the remains of Ennard into the sewer, which is what ultimately reveals that the events of these cutscenes take place after the events of Sister Location, and in fact depict Ennard's control of Eggs Benedict's body. And it's these scenes that got my science brain all afire, because they raise so many more questions than the answer. Like, why is Ennard still hiding in Egg's body when they've already escaped captivity? What sort of errands could Ennard possibly need to run? Do they wear the suit 24/7, or do they take it off when they get home and hang it up somewhere? But more important than all of this, how the hell does any of this work? How? My brain needs to know how! And so I figured it out, and believe me, the answer to how a human skin suit puppet works is amazing, and it may, in fact, surprise you. The first thing I had to figure out was, how big is Ennard? Because, you know, they've got to be squished inside this human being and working them like a puppet.
Like,
so first we got to figure out how possible that even is. And unfortunately, we don't know exactly how big Ennard is, because Ennard is an amalgam of like half a dozen animatronics, and we don't know how many parts are squished into their frame. That being said, we can make a pretty close estimate. Using the canon blueprints of Circus Baby, Ballora, Funtime Foxy, and Funtime Freddy, all animatronics that are used to make Ennard, I averaged their heights and their weights to get a ballpark size and weight for Ennard, which comes out to 6.325 feet, or just shy of 2 meters, and 393 pounds. Definitely taller than the average human male, but this isn't necessarily a deal breaker. From the final bonus cutscene, we can see that Ennard seems to be capable of being like any shape, so maybe it's just kind of like squished in there. The bodies of the animatronics are constructed from galvanized wire rope, basically a bunch of wires twisted together to form a super wire cable. Using pixel measurements from Funtime Foxy, who is 5.9 feet tall, I determined the cables to have a diameter of about 23.5 millimeters, which would put it between 7/8 of an inch and a full inch. Galvanized wire of this thickness weighs 1.485 pounds per foot, meaning there should be 264 feet of cable to make up a single animatronic the size of Ennard. We'll cut this down to 250 feet or 76 meters to make up for any other moving parts or computational stuff. That's about 75% the length of a football field. At a density of 29.89 kilograms per cubic meter, this means the smallest shape that Ennard can squish themselves down to would be about 1.779 meters across, taking up an entire volume of 5.63 cubic meters. According to the military standard for human engineering design criteria from 19...
What was it? So meters to inches. Yep. Oh my god. 1.779. Whoa. Important. Dude. It's still like 10 feet tall.
Meters. According to the military standard for human engineering design criteria from 1989, around the time the events of FNAF take place, an average human male torso only has an internal volume of 0.02878 cubic meters, meaning no matter how Ennard shapes themselves or squishes down, there's no way their entire body could fit into the chest cavity of eggs. Even more dramatically, the internal volume of the average male is only 0.06 cubic meters, entire orders of magnitude smaller than the amount of space needed by Ennard. So there's no way that all of Ennard could fit inside of one man's body. Bam! Busted! Okay, so not really busted, because we have no reason to believe that this is what Ennard did. Ennard could have just as easily scrapped all the parts they didn't need in order to fit inside of Egg's body and operate it like Krang from the Ninja Turtles. After all, what's the point of having a whole mechanical body when you already have one that's made of flesh and blood right there? The real question, I think, is how on earth is Ennard moving around in a dead body? I originally thought this was impossible, but after spending a week reading about the stages of death, I can say that, well, you'll see. Let's go over the important parts first. When you die, all cell respiration comes to a halt. The cells responsible for pumping blood throughout your body and the heart seize up, and pallor mortis sets in, where all your blood stops moving around and drains from your capillaries. The cells of your muscles, unable to produce adenosine triphosphate, the molecular energy currency, due to a lack of oxygen, contract. With no ATP to signal relaxation, all of the muscles in the body stiffen entirely. This is what's called rigor mortis. Literally stiffness of death. Under normal circumstances,
you missed 29 other episodes, but
muscles don't unlock until the cells, unable to function properly, engage in autolysis. That is to say, they literally eat themselves alive. This loosens up all the muscles and allows the joints to move again. Neat! Under normal conditions, all this happens in about a day, and up until this point, the body looks mostly normal, maybe a little weird, but major rot has not set in yet, and rigor mortis can be alleviated by massaging the muscles in question. Why do I bring this up? Because the more I look into it, the more I realize that making and operating a human flesh puppet like Ennard does in Sister Location, it's totally plausible. Just like those dead frogs' legs can be compelled to contract by either introducing electricity and calcium ions to the sciatic nerve or sodium ions directly to the muscles, it would be totally plausible for a weird robot animatronic to manually operate the leg muscles of eggs. It would not be easy. Anyone who's played co-op or Manual Samuel can attest to the fact that manually operating body parts in synchrony is not simple, but it is doable, especially for a robot that's been more or less perfectly trained at manually manipulating robotic skeletons and balancing itself so it can walk and talk and interact with children. For the first few days, while there's still leftover ATP and the other ions available, it could theoretically be possible for Ennard to manually stimulate the femoral nerve with electricity in order to contract and relax the rectus femoris, gluteus, tibialis, and digitorum muscle groups in order to walk. After day 2 or 3, though, things get a bit more complicated. As autolysis progresses, bacteria that ordinarily would be kept in line by the immune system start to invade the body, and leftover ions and ATP run out of energy. Muscles and other organs would stop functioning even with electrical stimulation, because on a microscopic level, well, they no longer really resemble cells anymore. They're just broken masses of quickly gelifying organic material. Thankfully, at this point, rigor mortis is definitely gone. And if Ennard were to, say, install motors at the hip and kneecaps, they'd actually be able to walk more easily than before. But then there's the problem of putrefaction. The body is decomposing quickly without—
Yeah, but we already know Michael can't die because he was scooped.
Refrigeration or embalming. The collapse of a human body is fast. Enzymes leaked from burst cells and organs combined with bacteria start to produce gases that will fill up every cavity and begin to bloat after 3 days, and the body turns green. After a week, the organs have decayed to the point where they're liquefied. Skin would be barely hanging onto the body and it would turn from green to red. And why do I bring this up? Because literally, we see this happen in game, 7 cutscenes in a row where the body gets progressively more mangled. It gets a worse color. Ennard starts to have a difficult time walking properly. People are frightened, just a few at first, probably because of the smell and probably the bugs. He starts to turn literally green within the exact decomposition time frame forensic experts give for an unattended body. By day
Scott does his research.
6, he's turned red. Well, okay, no, he turned purple, but he's definitely changed color from green. He is nasty. And by day 7, he's barely holding himself together. And when Ennard leaves, Eggs' body collapses as though it was literally made of liquid. The point is, this is
Ennard like replaced his bones.
Amazingly accurate. For a hack job done by a sentient animatronic with no access to embalming materials or a walk-in refrigerator to delay decomposition, this is exactly what would happen at the exact same rate as it happens. It's actually less likely that Ennard ran away from Eggs' body and rather that they literally just couldn't keep the body together and walking anymore. Plus, a walking corpse is not a very good disguise. So, what if you are an animatronic yourself looking to escape in a human body? I recommend buying a giant refrigerator. They can keep bodies from decaying for weeks if need be. Also, remove all the internal organs. They're just going to accelerate the rotting process. And if you can get your hand on embalming fluid, you can probably use a body for several months. Learn from Ennard. Don't rush it. Preserve your Edgar suit, and it will last you ages. Sincerely, Austin.
Get off my screen, Austin, bro. You're weird. I want Matt Pat back.
Hey, guys. We grabbed some treats from movie night.
The books offer a closer peek at Henry and William Afton, how their partnership flourished early on, and how their view of the animatronics evolved over time. Thoughtful fans might want to give these sections a closer look to determine how they impact the story of the games as well. Right there. Clear as crystal. For years, I've been trying to piece together the story of these games, right? But one thing has always served as a major sticking point, and that thing has been these books. Now, admittedly, these books entered the series at a tough time. FNAF 4 had released a few months prior, the game that, to this day, serves as the single biggest point of frustration for anyone trying to piece together the lore. Scott always trolls us. See also the repeated use of the name Jeremy, but this...
There's no point trying to piece together the lore by yourself when you could just go find like hundreds of videos that are already doing that for you. Some of them are also probably just taking exactly what MatPat's saying and just putting it in their videos.
This one game was just too much. It was a game that played with so many different ideas. It played with dreams and dates and bites and balloon boys and new characters and new toys, kids that looked like established characters. I mean, what was real, what wasn't, no one had any idea, and still to this day, we are at a loss about what this game means for the entire franchise as a whole. And then, shortly after that, FNAF World would enter the picture, and well, we all know how well that one went.
Yo, FNAF World is good. When was this video made? 4 years ago, 2020. So this was after the update, and then now it's way better than it was before.
So, needless to say, it was a sensitive time for the series, and sandwiched in between it all was the Silver Eyes, the start of the novels, a story set in the FNAF universe, but not really? Question mark? Scott Cawthon, when the books first came out, tried to make it clear what role these played in the greater story, but I don't know if it helped things. Here's his quote. "The truth is that after a while, lore can become so dense that there isn't any room for a story anymore. Another truth is that what makes for a good game doesn't necessarily make for a good book. Sometimes a timeline gets so full that the only way to tell a real story is have that story set in a different timeline, an alternate universe, a different location, or perhaps from a vantage point that isn't entirely what it appears to be." It's an interesting quote. True to Scott's style, it doesn't give anything away. I mean, everyone immediately latched onto this idea that the books were somehow a separate and alternate universe, but if you come back and read that quote again, like I just did here for the first time in years writing this script, it's actually only one of the possibilities that he raised. In fact, now that all 3 of the books have come out and completed the main story arc, we actually know what they really were. It was that last thing, a vantage point that wasn't entirely what it appeared to be. Now, spoiler alert for the books, but basically at the end of this one, the grand finale, Fourth Closet, it's revealed that our main character, Charlie, is an animatronic recreation of a dead girl. That the brilliant roboticist Henry, co-founder of Freddy's, had a daughter named Charlotte, who was kidnapped and killed by his partner, William Afton, at the age of 3. And that out of his grief, he rebuilt her. And that the character that we've been following for all 3 of these books isn't actually a human being, but just a glorified animatronic that grows older with time. Now, it sounds really weird, but here, let me explain. So, the 4 closets, what that's in reference to, basically, Henry created 4 versions of that robot, each one meant to simulate a different life stage that she would never get to experience. Toddler, tween, teen, adult, thus allowing this robot child to grow up over time, infusing each one of those robots with fabricated memories of a childhood he created using a camera and tripod. And if you think that sounds weird, then you haven't finished reading this book, my friends, because this book jumps so many sharks. But that is nothing compared to what this book does to the animatronic baby that we all know and love. Baby, you know, the clown girl. Well, in the books, she's actually the perfect 4th adult version of Charlotte, but she's also the robot that still, like we see in the games, devours William Afton's daughter Elizabeth and then goes on to get possessed by her. So this one robot is simultaneously Elizabeth's soul inside of Charlie's adult body, but in addition to dancing and singing and extruding out ice cream, she also has the ability to switch between looking like a passable human, so much so that a character in here actually gets aroused by her.
Whoa.
No joke, and also expanding somehow into a giant clown-shaped robot, the one that we all know and love. She does this by using a combination of needles with little balls on the end, as well as sound illusion discs. I mean, how ridiculous is this, right? It's a good thing nothing that stupid appears in the games.
Doggo. Doggo, I don't even know what Charlie looks like. Not me. I thought that was just part of her design.
Yep, they're in the games, aren't they? They are, actually. If you look at Baby's design as it's presented in the games, you see exactly what this book is talking about. The needles with the little balls on the end, and yeah, even the weirdo sound illusion discs. You might see where I'm going with this, right? Well, many hardcore fans want to dismiss the books and treat them as a separate entity, wall them off entirely from what's going on in the game.
I don't know how to spell Charlie.
Good thing, as well as we all know, when love actually gets aroused by her.
Yo, that's the worst part to like. Okay, I got it right.
No joke. As it's presented, wall them off entirely from what's going on in the games. You just can't. This book right here, Silver Eyes, is what allowed me to know that Purple Guy's name was going to be revealed as William Afton before Sister Location actually revealed that to be the case.
Those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
Ah! Yeah! Nailed it already! These are—
Hold up, I need to hear what you said.
Ah! Yeah!
I don't know where.
Nailed it already! These are the things that confirm that Susie and Fritz were missing children's incident victims before it appeared in FNAF 6. The 4th closet explained what Candy Cadet's stories were all about. 5 animatronics, 5 souls, all melted down into one entity. But because my theories based on the books tended to frustrate hardcore community members, I backed off of using them. But here we are now, me sitting on the couch reading this. The Freddy Files Updated Edition, which, in addition to including more fan art than a typical game theory episode, also has that quote that I mentioned from earlier. Here on page 222, second to last page in the book, thoughtful fans might want to give these sections about Henry and William a closer look to determine how they impact the story of the games as well. It's no denying it now, friends. These things, right over here, these 3, they're important. They are here to stay.
Doggo, I'm not really seeing 100% of what you're saying.
I threw away everything. All our assumptions, all the things that I thought we had solved from—
Doggo. What? Oh, let's go over. No. Where? Not the what one? Dude, I can't zoom back out. I'm stuck. Get me out. No. Doggo, what'd you say? Doggo, you weird.
The games, and I took a fresh, clean look at this franchise, this time starting from the perspective of the books.
The newest robot,
an insane thought.
The robot version?
Now,
when she's
I don't
baby?
necessarily think that today's theory is right. I definitely think that there are plenty of holes in it, but I also don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for the story that Scott is trying to tell. It's a theory that's worth chewing on because it simultaneously overturns a lot of the assumptions that we've made about this series while also filling in a lot of logical holes in the timeline of events. This is a big one, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. Big like what we missed in FNAF 4, kind of big. Here's my theory for you today. Mustard Man. You know, orange guy from FNAF 6. I'm gonna say he's Henry, original creator of the animatronics, co-owner of Fredbear's Family Diner. That would make this Henry's house. In turn, that would thereby make FNAF 4 his house as well. And if that's his house, then this is Henry's son, and this is Henry's other son. That's right, Crime Child isn't any member of the Afton family. He is Henry's son. And then that would make this and this Henry's daughter. And therefore, this then would be Henry's daughter's empty room.
I see what you're looking at now.
Hold on. I am sure there are plenty of you hardcore FNAFers out there who are ready to tear this huge list apart. This is clearly the Afton household. We have established this time and time again since the release of Sister Location, but stay with me. Sit back, relax. Who am I kidding? Pull out your pen and paper, start taking notes for your angry rage comment down below. This is a FNAF theory unlike anything we've ever talked about.
I gotta start paying attention because I don't know what he's talking.
Jump into it.
So I already told you the big reveal at the end of the fourth closet, that our protagonist Charlie is a robot built in the image of Henry's dead daughter. But there is one last twist here. On the very last page of the book, we go to visit Charlie's grave. The real Charlie. The child who was kidnapped and killed at an early age. It's a grave that ends up high on a hill under a lone tree, similar to a very familiar scene that we see in the games at the end of FNAF 6, the gravestone ending. And on it, we're told the following words were etched into the stone.
You need a
beloved daughter, Charlotte Emily, 1980 to 1983. First off,
she was 3?
her last name is Emily? I mean, there's no other name written here, so that isn't her middle name. So Henry's last name is Emily? We're talking about the Emily family household? It's just weird. I mean, this is a book series filled with animatronics that are possessed by human children and metallic soul glue, but Emily as your last...
I thought, Henry's last name was like Miller or something.
Name? That is to be the single largest stretch of imagination out there. And no offense to anyone with Emily as their actual last name. I know it's a real thing. I'm just over-exaggerating my rage for comedic effect. But the important thing here is the date, right? Born in 1980, died in 1983. 83. Should sound familiar, right? Well, why does it matter? FNAF 4. FNAF 4, a game that ends with someone getting themselves bitten, is not depicting the bite of 87 like we all assumed when we first saw that scene, but instead is a game that is set in the year 1983. It frustrated everyone. I mean, why would you choose to do that, Scott? It made no sense for the story that we had become familiar with by that point in the series. It made no sense until today. We know that the gravestone is real. We know that Henry truly has a daughter who dies and goes on to become the puppet in the games. So what if that death took place in 1983 like we see in the book? Opens up a lot of possibilities. You see, the other thing that never quite gets explained is this empty girls' room that we're allowed to explore throughout FNAF 4's minigame. Clearly, there's a reason it's here, but we never get a clue as to why or who that room could belong to. This, in turn, led all us FNAF theorists to speculate wildly about the owner of this room. Anyone with 2 X chromosomes was up for debate. This pigtail girl, and that was it. Honestly, because she was literally the only girl that was introduced into the series at this point. Later, when Sister Location came out, we got ourselves a second girl, and everyone celebrated. It was Afton's daughter, Elizabeth, so that room had to be hers, right? I mean, the game was even alluding to it being hers because it was the Sister Location. But let's stop for a minute and question all of those assumptions. Because that's what they are, really. There's not a whole lot of proof here. What if that girl's room in FNAF 4 belonged to Charlie? Charlotte, Henry's daughter, who dies in 1983. I mean, the room is empty, after all. And we're not seeing a whole heck of a lot of girls wandering around the playground area. And the year certainly matches the year of the disappearance and death from the books. Could that girl's room in FNAF 4 actually be Charlotte Emily's room? Could this whole house from FNAF 4 actually be the Henry Emily household? Consider this. In the second novel, The Twisted Ones, a climactic final battle happens in an underground animatronic facility. Sounds a bit like our Sister Location. When our heroes emerge to the surface, they find themselves in the ruins of a familiar house. Here's the quote. "Don't you see where we are?" Charlie whispered. "John, it's my dad's house. It's the room we found." The underground facility isn't under William Afton's house. Instead, in the books, it's hidden under Henry's house. And now, what do we see in the games? A hidden facility buried directly under the FNAF 4 house. A house that we've been assuming up until this point to be Afton's house.
But is that Afton's house?
But it's starting to look more and more like it might be Henry's. And that's not all. Let's take a minute to flash back to FNAF 6, shall we?
I think the house that we see, like the actual house we've been able to see, is William's. But the FNAF 4 house, it doesn't look the same as Afton's.
Now, overall, I feel like we've done a pretty darn good job of wrapping up this game's loose ends. We know all the names on the different gravestones. We know what Candy Cadet is rambling on about. We know that Fruity Maze Girl here is Susie, who gets lured away and stuffed into Chica. Heck, we even know that the game itself, this building, could be the potential box where the pieces all come together and eventually get burned away. But the one thing that we don't know is the answer to Midnight Motorist, a minigame that, true to form, was the one moment in every FNAF game where everyone collectively looks at the screen and then slams their head on the desk. What? There's an orange guy now? Who the heck is the kid? Where did he go? Why is his window broken? Why are there footprints outside of the window? What is going on? I mean, we have smoothed over so much of this franchise, and I feel so confident about so much of this lore, and that one little mini game is the one that just like niggles the back of my mind. If I could ask Scott Cawthon one thing about this entire franchise, this is the one that I'd want him to explain. No joke, I don't care about anything else. This is the one that I feel so befuddled on, why I'm so determined to solve it, and why I'm doing today's theory. Because in the past, I've felt fairly confident saying that the mustard man here is William Afton, because he drives a purple car and he's driving away from the scene where the puppet girl died. But now, I'm not so sure. It always bothered me, and literally everyone else, that a guy who has been associated with one color, the color purple, for the entirety of this franchise is suddenly orange. I tried to dismiss it as Scott pulling a Scott, but you know, that's not the most satisfying answer. It doesn't feel conclusive, you know? And more importantly, those footprints outside of the window. I mean, why are they there? Either an animatronic went to meet this boy outside of his window.
That's weird.
That seems unlikely based on how we know these animatronics behave. Or it was someone in a costume showing up to lure the boy out of his room. That one definitely seems like the more likely solution, but the only person in the entirety of this franchise who would do something like that is big ol' Willie A. And why would he do something like that to his own kid in his own house and then get mad about it?
I'm just not remembering the name. I don't know if it's actually like lore-wise the name I know.
It's a question that really started to bother me when I was playing FNAF VR Help Wanted. Glitch Trap is clearly modeled after the first suit ever used by William Afton. You can tell based on his stitching. This is a hand-sewn bodysuit rather than any sort of animatronic suit that we would see later in the series. This also coincides with the timing of the Midnight Motorist cutscene, which shows the birth of the puppet, one of the first major deaths of the entire FNAF story. Glitch Trap's suit also very distinctly has 3 toes, just like the footprints outside of the boy's window. Now, as we know, Scott Cawthon likes to clarify things in his next game. And if there was one huge question mark left from before, that Midnight Motorist minigame was it. So we have ourselves a suit that would have been in use around the time of the minigame, as well as a matching foot pattern to the design that we see in the minigame. Heck, we even have ourselves a potential reference to it from Ultimate Custom Night and the Toy Chica cutscenes.
He'll be mine by the end of the day. I just know it. I told him to come over later. That should be enough. And if he doesn't show up, I'll just go to his house. And if he doesn't open the door, I'll just find a window. And
here's where everything starts coming together. Let's assume that William Afton, in his glitch trap suit with its 3 toes, is the one who's standing outside of that window, outside of Henry's house. He lures the crying child out, now Henry's son, to bring him back to the place that he loves more than anywhere else in the world, Fredbear's Family Diner. But we know that this is also the night where William takes his first victim, Charlotte, who's killed outside of the diner. This would explain why in FNAF 6, the crying child would actively run to Fredbear's against his father's will, but later, come FNAF 4, he would be terrified of stepping foot there. Remember what you saw and all that, as Psychic Fredbear reminds him constantly. He saw the murder happen that night. That is what we're seeing in that FNAF 6 minigame. Meanwhile, we have ourselves the Mustard Man, who we're assuming is gonna be Henry. He has a kid who has not only run away on multiple occasions, but is so determined to do so that he's willing to break through his own window to get there. So how do you keep him safe at home? Well, you lock him in his room, just like we see happen in FNAF 4. But maybe locking him in his room isn't enough. Maybe you also have a series of security cameras hidden around the room. Heck, hidden around your house, hiding a security camera inside the Fredbear plushie that he takes everywhere, to keep your son safe, to keep track of where he is at any given point in time. Heck, maybe you could go so far as to design sound illusion discs to make him scared of the animatronics that he's seeing. His once beloved animatronic friends now terrifying to him, causing nightmarish hallucinations of the characters, just like the discs that we see hidden inside of Funtime Freddy's chest and sister location. The same discs that Henry is confirmed to have created in the books. These two, right here, they play a huge role in these 2 books. Though most of them in the books bear Afton's name, they were originally created by Henry in an attempt to warp the world around him, to hide from the grief that he felt after the loss of his child. Discs that, wouldn't you know it, Afton hides inside the Funtime robots, just like we see in the games. But as we see in FNAF 4, it isn't enough. The crying child still winds up at Freddy's, he still gets himself bitten, and he dies. With that iconic line in yellow, "I will put you back together." Now, remember that quote I keep going back to in this book right here, second to last page? Thoughtful fans might want to revisit sections of how Henry and Afton's view of the robots change over time in order to determine how they impact the story of the games. Well, Henry in the books uses the robots to bring his daughter back to life. He rebuilds her. He puts her quite literally back together. He used the robots to try and heal his grief. I mean, if anyone in this series is gonna say a line like, "I will put you back together," it's Henry. Heck, maybe Mustard Man is the color that he is in order to better match the color of his FNAF 4 text. "I will put you back together" in yellow. And yeah, sure, it's yellow and not orange, but guess what? Purple Guy was pink in his first outing. As the series has gotten darker, so too has the color palette. But seriously, there are 2 colors that are relatively similar. Maybe there's a connection there. And if the crying child is indeed Michael, as I've talked about a lot in past theories, Henry literally rebuilding his lost son, like he does his lost daughter in the books, explains all of the weirdness of Mike's behavior throughout the series. How he's able to survive being scooped, how he has fragmented memories of his past, how he doesn't die after puking up mom's robot spaghetti, how he's only able to die by fire.
I should be dead, but I'm not.
It's also worth noting that at no point in the series is Michael ever explicitly identified as Michael Afton. Now, it seems like Mike in Sister Location is referring to William Afton as father.
Father, it's me, Michael.
And him saying,
I'm going to come find you.
As Springtrap appears, definitely makes it seem like he's going out and looking for William, but that may just be another Scott misdirect. It's open to interpretation. I mean, this scene alone still has people convinced that Springtrap is Mike trapped inside of the suit. Mike Trap, even though I feel like it's pretty well established at this point that it's William Afton in there. It's still Will Trap. But there are people who are vehemently determined that Mike Trap is the reality of the canon of this series. Regardless of the whole Michael stuff, William Afton in these books is all about achieving immortality through the robots. He's interested in the science of it all. He wants to study the original FNAF gang and replicate the living metal that resulted from their deaths. That's why we see him tearing apart the robots in FNAF 3's minigames. He wants access to their metal. He wants to harvest it to run experiments. He wants to melt down those living endoskeletons so he can harness the possessed metal to create the Funtime animatronics. I mean, that is the whole point of Candy Cadet's stories in FNAF 6. 5 things melted down to create one thing, and it's exactly what we see happen as a huge plot point in the final book. Henry, on the other hand, is the emotional one. He's a creator who gets too invested in his own work. He's a bit of a neglectful father while he's alive, but he's devastated when he loses his daughter, turning to the one and only thing that he knows and understands to try and bring her back: robots. He goes to extreme lengths to use his robotic skills to try and bring her back to life, and he does it. He succeeds. He creates the most absurdly lifelike humanoid animatronics ever in science fiction. And they have to be to do some of the stuff that you see happen in these books because it is absurd. But if we are truly meant to apply the themes of these books to the games, then this isn't the Afton family household. It doesn't make sense. It's the Emily family household. It would explain the factory under the house. It would explain the empty girl's bedroom in FNAF 4. It would explain the 1983 date that we're presented with. It would say why Mustard Man is yellow, why there are footprints outside the window, why the crying child is suddenly scared of Freddy's, and it would even go so far as to explain the line, "I will put you back together." I mean, are there holes to this thing? Absolutely. Are there things that are difficult to explain? Are you kidding me? This is FNAF. Gonna be true no matter this is William's house, Henry's house, or the frickin' White House. It's an extreme theory, but I think it's one that's worth considering because of its alignment with the books and because of the lingering threads that it answers. Which is why today I encourage you to discuss down below in the comments, discuss over on Reddit, and most importantly to remember that it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Oh, these are amazing.
Wow.
Wow, that's good.
Wow, these are good.
It's delicious.
What if I
don't care what they
Ready
are.
to have your mind blown by FNAF yet again? Let's do a little trick, shall we? I'm in the process of currently downloading and installing brand new copies of each and every one of the FNAF games, so you all know that we're working with a blank slate here. But the games that we're specifically interested in are FNAF World and Ultimate Custom Night, the free ones. Huzzah for not having to buy these games for literally like the 4th time. Let me just open up both of these on the computer to show you that we are working with absolutely clean and fresh copies of both these games. Open up FNAF World. The first time that we open this, we should get that cutscene of the 2 yellow beady eyes telling us that something has happened out in the world. There it is. We're just gonna wait here a second while that dramatically plays. We hit start, and you can see here, literally nothing on screen, right? We have slots 1, 2, and 3, all empty, no trophies along the bottom. And that's the important point here, right? Each time you beat the game, you get a different trophy along the bottom based on what ending you got. So notice 0 along the bottom. And that's the important point here, right? Each time you beat the game, you get a different trophy.
I'm missing this ending and this ending. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No. I've never seen this. Or this. But I have 8 endings. Huh.
Along the bottom based on what ending you got. So notice 0 trophies, 0 endings, 0 gameplay. Okay, so we're gonna X out of that as well. Fantastic. Hopping on over to Ultimate Custom Night. There is no high scores unlocked. We have no power-ups that have been given to us. Our office is the default office. Nothing, right? No creepy cutscenes of Toy Chica in her skimpy school uniform. Nothing. We are clean to go. Nada. Now, let me set the scene for you, right? If you think back to the release of Ultimate Custom Night, we were all really excited to see who would be included in this mega list of who's who in the FNAF universe. This big final game to celebrate the ending of the series, burning things to the ground at the end of FNAF 6. Some of the inclusions were obvious, right? Like the 70+ versions of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, Springtrap, Golden Freddy, and the Puppet, right? They're in practically every game, they're super important to the lore of the games, no big surprises there. But then, when the roster kept expanding, you got to some weird inclusions, right? You got yourself Music Man over here. Why? El Chip, which is basically just a glorified reference to like one of his failed games before Five Nights at Freddy's. Strange, sapient pile of garbage over here. Like, not people that you would immediately think of as being included in the like must-have list of characters in this franchise. But of them all, there was one inclusion that felt the strangest of all to me. This one right here. Old Man Consequences from FNAF World. A character who, if you're not super familiar with that particular game, is your punishment for going too deep into the code of the game. You see, FNAF World is a video game that's aware that it's a game, right? And throughout the adventure, you repeatedly have to dive into these glitches to unlock new parts of the world. But you're repeatedly warned against going more than 3 layers deep into those glitches, otherwise you're gonna be trapped there forever. And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what happens if you don't heed the warnings. You wind up at Old Man Consequences Lake, trapped. What makes it so weird to see him here, though, in Ultimate Custom Night, is that FNAF World is a game that Scott has largely disowned. He's embarrassed of it, and it's a game that's ultimately been dismissed by the fan base as non-canon, in part because of those reasons, but also in part because it seems more closely tied to the book lore than it is to the game lore. And yet,
isn't part of it actually canon?
Old Man Consequences in Ultimate Custom Night, alongside characters that are definitely canonical in a game that is also canonical, right? It has the canonical ending of William Afton suffering eternal torment at the hands of Golden Freddy. It's almost like Scott Cawthon is telling us that Old Man Consequences is implicitly canonical. He's canonical by association. So, why do I bring all this up? Well, there's an Easter egg in Custom Night that you've probably seen back when people were playing that game, right? You set Old Man Consequences to a difficulty level of 1, and you start your night. Gonna turn off the fan, and here we sit. There's no one here to attack us outside of Old Man Consequences, so hopefully he shows up. Oh, and here's Dee Dee, who has, by proxy of doing this, ruined our opportunity to unlock this Easter egg, so we're going to restart. Please Alt for this game. We're gonna try again. Reset the ventilation, thank you. Oh, there he is. Boom. Good. So now, here we go, right? We're falling, quote unquote, falling through the source code of the game. We wind up here. This is Old Man Consequences Lake, right? You may have seen this Easter egg during people's gameplays, but here we go. We go to Old Man Consequences over here, and he gives us his line. Come and sit with me a while. Leave the demon to his demons. Rest your soul. There's nothing else. We concluded in one of our past theories about Ultimate Custom Night that this is Old Man Consequences talking to the vengeful spirit that exists inside Golden Freddy, trying to tell him, hey dude, chill out, move on with your afterlife. Just let William Afton suffer on his own. Because if you listen to the audio that's playing in the background of this scene, you can definitely hear him suffering. Well, it's either his tormented screams or, you know, Scott Cawthon shouting through a fan.
Yeah, it is,
now, most people seeing this Easter egg would be like, well, now what do I do? There's nothing else. I guess I gotta restart the game. Alt F4. And already this would be a really cool, really elaborate Easter egg. However, for those of us who have played through and know FNAF World better than we probably should, we know that there is one final thing that you can do in this scene, right?
I will be
you can
playing
move on
actual
over
games once I'm
to
done
the top of the
this
lake,
one.
and you can drown yourself. Now, in that game, when you did this, it would actually reveal a secret ending that is completely hidden from that game's texture files. It shows a person standing alongside 2 smaller figures in front of this flashing TV screen.
Yes, I do, sir. You haven't even been in my streams enough to know what I do.
At least that's as much as I can make of it, right? And sure enough, you can actually do the same thing here in Ultimate Custom Night, going into the lake and drowning yourself. Except here, it ultimately crashes the game. I'm going deep into the lake. Uh-oh, I'm trapped in the water. Oh no! It's like quicksand. It's not so much a lake as it is quicksand, but here we go. We're going down into the lake, deeper, 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 and it crashes the game, right? We're back to the home screen. No hidden ending or Easter egg there, but here's where things get crazy. Instead of me booting up Ultimate Custom Night again, we're gonna hop back over to that brand new, fresh, clean copy of FNAF World that I showed you earlier. Here we go, FNAF World. We have not played this game whatsoever, and we hit start. Wouldn't you know it? Without playing a second of this game, look what suddenly appeared on our menu screen. A trophy that you unlock in FNAF World by visiting Old Man Consequence's lake. In other words, these two games, but more importantly, in the lore of this franchise, these two worlds are connected somehow. But what does all this mean? That
it's just like
is our episode
Mr. Tomato and Mrs. Lemon, other combined games.
For today.
There's a 7-minute long intro. Jeez.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the channel where it's always April considering the number of Easter egg hunts we go on. So that connection between FNAF World and Ultimate Custom Night was originally discovered by Reddit user Roxas Lucario, and it ultimately hinges on an info file that collects variable information from across the various games. For instance, the first time you start up FNAF World, you're presented with an opening cutscene.
Something went very wrong, that's why I'm here. I will put you back together.
Great, awesome. Go to the info page after seeing that creepy opening cutscene, and suddenly the trigger first is activated, presumably telling the game that you've seen that scene once before, so for all subsequent playthroughs, you don't have to see it again. That's how these sorts of variables work. But what's weird, though, is that the trigger for this drowned ending and unlocking the trophy is titled Beat Game 4, which might just mean it's the fourth ending of FNAF World, fine, but why then would Scott use that exact same variable name in Ultimate Custom Night? It's not like there's multiple endings in that game, and it's not like Ultimate Custom Night is the fourth game in the franchise. Him using that exact same variable name suggests that the connection between the two was very much intentional, and that, my friends, is just scratching the surface. Because this small but very, very important Easter egg starts laying the groundwork for where this series is ultimately headed moving forward, where FNAF VR clearly left off, and where the new FNAF AR game, Special Delivery, releasing this October, is taking us next. Oh yeah, didn't you know? There's a new FNAF AR game and it's right around the corner. There's a trailer for it and everything. Because my torment is year-round and unceasing.
I need to know though, is anything in FNAF AR actually like canon? Probably not.
Looks like we're gonna end up playing hide and seek with a bunch of animatronics, but more on that one in a minute. FNAF World was a game that was largely ignored by us theorists because, well, look at it.
You won't get tired of my voice, will you?
I'm not sure what that
But in all seriousness, for all the memes
Doggo, what's your
this
favorite
franchise
place
has,
in
it's
FNAF
never been
World?
particularly meta. The lore, on the whole, was its own self-contained story within this fictional universe. The only times things got truly meta was in FNAF World, which sure helped us to predict the appearance of Baby and Henry into the mainline games, but it was also the game where Scott Cawthon literally appears as the final boss, complaining about how sick he was of pumping out new games for our insatiable appetite for animatronic death. Scott, you're our mama bird, my friend. Puke that sweet, sweet lore down into my gullet. But you can see why most of us would take this as a joke, right? Scott isn't a character in the FNAF universe, so it has to be just another game for the lols. Except now, Scott is a character in the games. As of FNAF VR, it's revealed to us that Scott, since the beginning, has played a critical role in the lore of the FNAF universe.
We know that Fazbear Entertainment has developed something of a bad reputation over the last few decades, and while it's true that some stories associated with our name were loosely based on actual events, the majority of them were total fabrications from the mind of a complete lunatic. Lawsuits pending.
And if that wasn't explicit enough, the secret tapes hidden throughout the game make it even clearer.
They lied to us. They lied to all of us. They told us that the whole point of this VR game was to undo the bad PR
Why
done
did
by a
Scott
rogue
make
indie game
himself
developer
canon
who
in his own
supposedly
game?
made up a bunch of crazy stories that tarnished the brand.
Don't have to tell me twice, that rogue indie developer is obviously Scott. That's just where it begins, because FNAF World was trying to tell us something else about where this franchise was headed. Video games crossing into the real world and vice versa. You see, FNAF World is a lot of things. A lot of things. But its main plot revolves around the aftermath of FNAF 4. We're told when we first boot up the game that something has happened out there in the real world, and it's having an effect in here, the sanctuary, the world of this particular game. From there, the rest of the game features a main quest that's completely hidden. You could go through this entire game and never come across the actual real plot of this thing. The only way that you would know about this is by accidentally lingering on the first dialogue boxes of the game, which in turn releases glitched 8-bit Fredbear. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. Who we gonna call? Glitched 8-bit Fredbear. This, in turn, unlocks separate missions to find clocks, and it's here that we find our first instance of video game to real-life crossover. You see, each clock is a minigame that connects back to FNAF 3, and all the individual steps necessary to unlock the Happiest Day cutscene. That game's good and canonical ending. If you think way back to that game, it always bothered me that punching random blocks on a wall or double-clicking a random poster in your real-life security office was somehow allowing us to put the spirits of the dead children to rest. But FNAF World gave us an explanation even though we ignored it back at the time. FNAF World, the game world, or more accurately, the spirits that are trapped existing in that game's code, were able to push out and affect changes IRL through those clock minigames. That's how you get these kind of video gamey moments in what is otherwise a realistic, albeit haunted setting. Now, why is any of this important? Why are we talking about it now so many years after these games were first released? Well, because it's only starting to matter now. It's exactly what we saw happen at the end of FNAF VR Help Wanted. That game established sentient code that was looking to escape from its video game prison.
It was just junk, circuit boards and things like that. Looked pretty old. Somehow though, there was usable code on some of it. It seemed to take hold by itself. Things started changing.
What I'm saying here is that in the official lore of this series, official lore that is apparently dating back further than we would have expected, computer code is somehow able to store the minds or spirits or whatever of these characters and eventually rebirth them out into the real world if the right steps are taken. See also Petscop. And in FNAF VR, we see an instance of this happening. William Afton, who was trapped in the circuit boards, was released into the code of this new game, Help Wanted, where he then took the form of Glitch Trap until finally, through us playing the game and collecting the tapes and putting the pieces back together, was able to escape again. But this time, he was able to escape not just from circuit boards, but out into the real world. All of it, all of this goes back to the story that FNAF World was trying to tell us years ago. The story that we all didn't take seriously because the final boss was literally an impervious rainbow.
Are you kidding me?
Come on!
What?
I'm only just realizing it now, but Help Wanted is actually a cute and really brilliant name. I mean, we all thought it was Help in terms of like a want ad, right? Help.
Alright, anyway, I'll be right back. I'm gonna keep the video unpaused. I'll be right back. I'm gonna keep watching it on my phone.
As a video game tester, which is the core premise of the game, but it's also Help Wanted. Glitch Trap wanted, heck, he needed our help in order to escape, so well done, Scott, good name. Just like Pizzeria Simulator riffs on the idea of simulator games, but really it's an empty box waiting as a trap to catch the final animatronics and burn them alive, or how Sister Location is all about a separate but related robotics business, but also about a key character's sister, maybe, question mark. Well done, Scott, well done, slow clap. Now, you might be thinking, wow, malicious code, people trapped in video games? This sounds nothing like the original story that started off this whole franchise. And yeah, that's entirely the point. The old story of Five Nights at Freddy's was, at least in part, a complete lie.
They lied to us. They told us that the whole point of this VR game was to undo the bad PR done by a rogue indie game developer. But that's not true at all. Fazbear Entertainment hired the game developer. Those indie games were designed to conceal and make light of what happened. This isn't just an attempt to rebrand. It's an elaborate cover-up.
Let me rephrase what we just heard. Scott is one of the bad guys. Based on the lore in Help Wanted, he was hired on by Fazbear Entertainment to create the FNAF games, give us the spooky ghost stories that exist within them, and in turn distract us from the real truth. Distract us away from what Fazbear's goals really were. He was lying to us. If FNAF VR's tapes are to be believed, pretty much everything we know from the first 3, at least, but maybe even 4, 5, heck 6 games could all be thrown out as complete fabrications created by Scott Cawthon for the sole reason because he was paid off by Fazbear Entertainment. This thing, Glitch Trap, might not even be a recreation of someone named William Afton. Heck, William Afton might not even exist. Though, to be honest, he probably does since he's mentioned by name at the beginning of FNAF's sister location, and FNAF VR seems to replicate his original crimes pretty darn closely, so I'm gonna assume that some of that is actually true. The long story short here is that FNAF VR, in making Scott part of the Fazbear cover-up, is the franchise's way of rebooting the story for the next generation, telling us that with FNAF VR, we're starting an entirely new lore. In disowning Scott's story as lies, it's explicitly telling us that everything we've known up to this point is wrong. It's a distraction. Instead, the real story, the story that's going to be told to us via the next generation of Five Nights at Freddy's games, is carrying forward the core themes and ideas that were first introduced to us back in FNAF World. A story of video games, code, all coming to life and crossing over into the real world. And funny enough, if we look back to FNAF World, it was trying to tell us the truth about this theme the entire time. As 8-Bit Glitch Bear tells us in that game, don't be deceived by the one pulling the strings. It's why Scott is technically the final boss of the game, but the true ending, the clock ending that unlocks the key Easter eggs from FNAF 3, it has nothing to do with him at all. It's entirely disconnected from why Scott is there. Again, the indie developer known as Scott Cawthon within the FNAF lore is trying to distract us away from the truth of what we should be doing in these games. And if you think I'm reading too much into this, think again. Scott is trying to clue us back into the importance of FNAF World. As many of you know, Scott has his website, scottgames.com, where there's always some new teaser image and stuff hidden in the source code. And on there right now is a really cool teaser for the next FNAF game coming out in 2020. Clearly, by looking at it, it's a FNAF Stranger Things crossover, considering the 1980s era neon-themed mall straight out of season 3 of that show. But what's a little less well known, though, is Scott's second site, FNAFworld.com, which has been dormant for a really long time. Dormant, at least until a month ago. You see, it was updated to have a big old number 58 smack dab in the middle of it, and when you brighten things up, because you always brighten things up when you're given something by Scott Cawthon, you see a bunch of funny reviews appear for whatever this new game is gonna end up being. Now, the number 58 might seem like it's completely random, right? A weird, mysterious number, but it's actually not. It all goes back to, you guessed it, FNAF World. In that game, there's a playable demo for the latest unreleased FNAF game, Freddy in Space. That game's number, installment number 57. Meaning that Scott's next project, or at least one of his next projects coming out in a few months, is gonna be another wacky minigame with lore connections potentially hidden inside of it. In fact, if FNAF 57 Freddy in Space is to be believed, as you play through it in FNAF World, the next installment is gonna be titled Poopits in Space, which sounds completely dumb, but you saw those hidden reviews. They were not super positive about whatever FNAF 58 is shaping up to be. And heck, you don't even have to take it from me. It is coming straight from Scott's own disembodied head floating in a jar from that game. Like I said, FNAF World is weird. And we are still not done. The idea of games and code, digital horrors crossing over into the real world is becoming more explicit in his other new game that he's working on. The one that we know is
seems like I'm gonna have to replay
this
for FNAF World
FNAF
because
Special
I think
Delivery,
I'm missing
an augmented
like one
reality title
achievement.
that, based on the trailer and the title,
Maybe
will
two.
have animatronics being dropped off into
Even though
your
I already
house.
have 8.
Sure, the idea of using
I
your
don't know.
phone to see the animatronics roaming around your home might just seem like a fun, quirky new way to play these sorts of games, but from a lore standpoint, you wouldn't be surprised if what this is actually doing is forwarding the core themes of the new direction for the story of these games. Deadly characters starting off as harmless pieces of code and then escaping out into the real world through your device. It's happened with Glitch Trap, and by the nature of augmented reality, it's literally happening again in this game. Any way you slice it, the lines between reality and fiction are getting blurrier, and it's
just the pro. I figure out how to get the pro.
Things that are serving as the bridge linking those two worlds. It all started coming to a head with FNAF VR, but starting this October, don't be surprised if this franchise, as we know it, really starts to change. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. Me put up the subscribe button so you can click it and join the army of 12 million other loyal theorists out there just like you. But you can't click it and finish writing a comment about your favorite animatronic within 5 seconds of me counting. 5, 4, 3, 2, and heck, if you're itching to see more reality-bending storytelling like in FNAF World, well then check out our ongoing analysis of Petscop, the online horror video game web series. The finale of this mystery just aired. I'm actually working on my analysis of it right now, and you can be all caught up for when those final episodes air. Oh, I forgot to say one, didn't I? Look, you did it! Congratulations! Now my work is complete. I fade away into the darkness for yet another week. I'll see you next time for Kindergarten. Included in the must-have list of characters in this franchise. But of them all, there was one inclusion that felt the strangest of all to me. This one right here.
I'm not watching no Kindergarten.
Old Man Consequences
I watched him play
from FNAF World. A character who, if you're not super familiar with that particular game, is your punishment for going too deep into the code of the game. You see, FNAF World is a video game that's aware that it's a game, right? And throughout the adventure, you repeatedly have to dive into these glitches to unlock new parts of the world. But you're repeatedly warned against going more than 3 layers deep into those glitches, otherwise you're gonna be trapped there forever. And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what happens if you don't heed the warnings. You wind up at Old Man Consequences Lake, trapped. What makes it so weird to see him here, though, in Ultimate Custom Night, is that FNAF World is a game that Scott has largely
I only have Kindergarten 1.
He's embarrassed of it, and it's a game that's ultimately been dismissed by the fan base as non-canon, in part because of those reasons, but also in part because it seems more closely tied to the book lore than it is to the game lore. And yet, here he is. Old Man Consequences in Ultimate Custom Night, alongside characters that are definitely canonical in a game that is also canonical.
Because wasn't he literally just talking about that? Yeah.
Dear Scott Cawthon, hi, it's me, Austin, and it is time for my biggest challenge yet. Can I do a video on a game that—
Hold up.
Wix gives you the power of AI to build the website you need.
That's for video, man.
With full business.
Watch this one.
The books offer a close.
And then I was just on this one. And then replay this one. So I'm on this one. Got it.
And it is time for my biggest challenge yet. Can I do a video on a game that I haven't played yet, that isn't even out yet, based on no gameplay footage because it does not exist? And, hell, just to make it even extra challenging, can we turn one single image from the promotional press package into an entire video? Can we? Can we do it? You bet your donkey we can. The topic I want to cover today is actually really cool, and the main goal going through all of this is to make sure that I don't say anything that offends my favorite Persian electrical engineer on this website, Electroboom. So no, it's not the voltage that kills, but the current in this video. If I can get from right now all the way to the very end without saying anything super wrong about electrical engineering, I am going to consider that a solid win. And it all boils down to this one picture from the press package package for the Five Nights at Freddy's augmented reality game that's coming out soon-ish? Anyway, the game, officially called Five Nights at Freddy's AR Special Delivery, which is apparently trying to compete with anime for convoluted titles, will basically let you play Five Nights at Freddy's in the real world with your phone, so you can live in permanent fear by associating murderous animatronics with your real, actual house, the one that you sleep in. So that's fun. The game, like all augmented reality games, is played with your phone as the main interface with the rest of the world, and as a result, the designers of FNAF ARSD made the game reflect this by making it so all the buttons and stuff you press in-game are smartphone related. This also allows them to seamlessly integrate one of the normally baffling core game contrivances into the FNAF series into the game, the limited battery power. This brings us back to the picture from before. This one, a picture that shows us a returning mechanic from Sister Location, where you use electric shocks to temporarily disable the evil possessed robots that are trying to kill you. An electric shock coming from your cell phone, leaping several feet into a robot with enough power to disable them. Oh boy. So, shocking someone with your cell phone. This is not an easy numbers in, numbers out question to answer because there are a lot of moving parts to consider. We have some problems to overcome, but in the shortest, simplest terms, is it possible to use your cell phone to produce giant electrical arcs? Maybe. Let's try and figure it out. The first major problem is the robot itself. So the convention in FNAF, starting with Sister Location, is that electricity temporarily disables animatronics. This is not a permanent state. This is, unfortunately, not how electronics work. If you apply enough electricity to an electronic device to render it non-functional, that is, generally speaking, a permanent state. You have killed it. Good job. This is because if you apply really high currents to devices that exceed its rating, it will cause some component to permanently fail by burning out because, hey, electricity is a force caused by the moving of electrons, and its main byproduct is heat. A lot of electronics are protected by what's called a fuse, which is a point through which all electricity has to flow before reaching delicate components. If too much electricity flows through a fuse, the metal will melt and disconnect, breaking off the flow of electricity. That means that some devices need to be repaired by resoldering or plugging in a new fuse, but hey, at least it didn't fry any of the important parts. Unfortunately, in the case of Five Nights at Freddy's, this does not work, because if the animatronics turn themselves back on, that means that they clearly don't have a fuse, since when a fuse dies, it dies. Your house actually has very similar technology in it. It's your circuit breaker box. When too much electricity flows through a breaker, it heats up a deflected piece of metal, which activates a switch that disables the flow of electricity to a specific area of your house. The problem here is that breakers still need manual reactivation, meaning that once you disable a FNAF robot, it's turned off until some idiot turns it back on. Or at least that's what I thought, until I discovered auto-resetting circuit breakers. They work the exact same way as a normal switch breaker, but as the metal cools off after overheating, it will deflect back into place, reconnecting the power. Bam! Got him! The lowest rated automatically resetting breaker I could find was rated to switch off when 12 volts and 10 amps flow through it at a minimum of 4.5 seconds and a max of 28 seconds. We want the most temperamental breaker we can find because that's going to make it way more likely that our phone battery is going to realistically be able to work. The higher the power requirements, the less likely we're going to be able to bend the laws of the universe to make this make sense. Now the electricity. Phone batteries are all different, but most of them are under 4,000 milliamp hours and rated for 3.85 volts. This gives the typical phone battery a total energy storage of 51,282 joules, which we can figure out by taking the milliamp hours and multiplying them by 3,600 to get the total charge, and then multiply that by the voltage, which for my phone, a Pixel XL, which has seen better days. Look, I let my kid walk off with it, and when they came back, it looked like this. Life lesson: do not let your toddler play with your phone. But it still works fine. Look, see? Okay, I'll get a new phone.
This dude is tweaking
Anyway, my
out.
phone has 3,700 milliamp hours and a voltage of 3.85 volts, giving it a total potential energy of 51,282 joules. Bam! We can mostly ignore this for now, but it will be important later. Now, electrical arcs. Woohoo! Oh boy, electrical arcs. These are really tricky. Electricity does not want to arc across open air. There's usually tons of easier things to jump to before leaping through the air, which at distances in this picture are what, like 1 to 3 feet?
Why is Balloon Boy flying?
To arc across
look at the
open
back
air.
up.
There's
Balloon
usually
Boy is just flying.
tons of easier things to jump to before leaping through the air, which at
Why is he doing
distances in this picture are what, like 1 to 3 feet? That gives air a resistance of anywhere from 115-ish billion gigaohms to 375 billion gigaohms. In order to get electricity to arc these distances, you need really, really high voltages, like absurdly high. Technically, and this is technically, the voltage requirements to arc through a given gas are governed by Paschen's law, which is this ugly monster that I simply could not get to behave at all. I suspect it's this prime symbol over here that's giving me trouble. Thankfully, within these parameters, the voltages required for arcing electricity are pretty well known and mostly kinda linear. In Earth's atmosphere, at standard conditions, electricity requires 3 million volts per meter in order to arc. So for our phone zapper, we're looking at anything from 915,000 volts to 3 million volts. That is a lot to expect from a tiny battery rated for 3.85 volts. Now, there are ways to boost voltage while sacrificing your current, though. Unfortunately, all the best ways to do this seem to be using alternating current, or AC, for like 1,000 different reasons that I don't want to get into because I will say something wrong and mess it up. Chemical batteries, meanwhile, provide DC, or direct current. And it's here where I would love to cut away to an AC/DC song, and if I did that, Columbia Records would be like, and it's here where I'd love to take all of your money. So here's a knockoff version instead. I did vacillate on whether or not using a power inverter to turn the DC into AC, or whether to use what's called a DC step-up boost converter would be the best way to go. But then, looking at it further, I realized this wasn't even close to my biggest problem. The shortcomings of AC to DC is irrelevant when you compare it to the actual biggest problem. How do you store all these volts from such a low power source? Because it turns out you can't build a single capacitor capable of storing 3 million volts because, like I said before, air is a great insulator, better than most others. So voltages that are high enough to arc through the air are probably gonna arc through any other material you make the capacitor out of. A capacitor is a pretty simple device that's actually really similar to a chemical battery, but it holds electrons differently. Specifically, it's able to hold high voltages and release them much faster than a typical chemical battery. See, a chemical battery, which is like really almost like every single battery you use in everyday life, is a device that stores energy using, well, chemicals. In the case of lithium-ion batteries, like your cell phone has, one side of the battery has lithium cobalt oxide, and the other side has graphite, and they're separated by an electrolyte. When you charge the battery, the electrons are attracted to this side and flow through the power source and then deposited on the graphite. The lithium ions are then attracted through the electrolyte to the other side. Then, when you power something, this whole process works in reverse. Capacitors work in a very similar way by having two conductive metals side by side separated by an insulator. Electrons are free to build up on one side and push the electrons out of the other side. One side becomes negatively charged and the other positively charged, and you can release all this energy at once. Bam! The trade-off with capacitors is that they can hold less total energy than a battery, and they can hold it for only a kind of short period of time, and there are practical limitations to how much voltage a single capacitor can hold. Okay, so what are our problems, just to reiterate? In order to zap an animatronic, we have to up our 3.85 volt battery voltage up to 3 million volts somehow. We also have to store this energy in order to release it all at once. The only thing working in our favor is that once the arc has been established, the air it's passing through becomes ionized, which allows electricity to flow much more easily through it, meaning 3 million volts is a temporary requirement. The highest step-up converter I could find for DC was 300 volts. That is not ideal, because capacitors can only store charge at the peak voltage they're provided with. But do not fear, because capacitors that are wired in series together add their voltages together, meaning we only need a minimum of 3,000-ish capacitors and a maximum of 10,000. Since we don't actually need a ton of power output, we can use relatively weak ones, I think. Don't judge me, my king! Anyway, Mouser lets us buy capacitors in bulk for a discount so we can spend only $30,000 to $97,000 on capacitors weighing almost 19 kilograms or over 40 pounds. Now, once we've established our first arc, essentially ionizing the air, all we have to do is deliver a comparatively tame 20 amps at 12 volts over our ionized wire made of oxygen and nitrogen.
At some point, I chipped my tooth. I don't know when that happened. Dang.
Nitrogen over 4.5 to 28 seconds. With the aid of capacitors and step-ups, can our 51,282 joule battery handle this? Yes, with some limitations. Lithium-ion batteries can only really draw about 2.5 amps of current tops without risking melting the wires connected to them. This, along with volts, is our bottleneck. Because if you fry the connectors, you're never going to be able to use your phone or its battery ever again. The max wattage of our battery, which is joules per second or amps times volts, is 9.625 watts. At 9.625 joules per second and a required joules between 1,080 and 6,720, this means it would take anywhere from 112 seconds to just shy of 12 minutes to charge our capacitors and an average of 27 shocks per fully charged battery. That's kind of impressive. But of course, the implications if you were to build such a device are utterly terrifying. Sure, maybe you could shock an animatronic. Maybe. But you know what's way closer than an animatronic? You! The current is just as likely to short to you, or the phone chassis, delivering, depending upon where it hits, something as small as 12 milliamps, which would give you a really nasty shock, like youch, one of the worst ones you've ever felt in your life. But that's the best case scenario, because if conditions are just right, it can deliver up to 120 milliamps to your body, through your heart, which is instant, irreversible death. Also, that's all ignoring the Ghostbusters backpack you need to wear of full electrical equipment and capacitors and boosters in order to get the voltage high enough. I mean, honestly, even if you were to use a Tesla coil, usually Teslas that produce these voltages are huge. So either way, you're looking at a big, expensive backpack. And also, the implications of this is that the electric shocks are not an improvised weapon, because the animatronics are installed with auto-resetting circuit breakers. They are designed with this in mind. So you have a thousands of dollars device that exists all in order to temporarily disable a murderous robot for a few minutes. Wonderful! Hey, you know a much cheaper way to turn electricity created from a lithium-ion battery into a dead animatronic? It's called a Sawzall. You're welcome. Anyway, maybe I messed up enough stuff that you learned in your first 2 years of electrical engineering school to give Electro Boom material to do his own video, and maybe he'll finally, I don't know, make a functioning taser out of a cell phone battery or something? Man, I hope no one floods his inbox asking for a cell phone taser that runs off your cell phone battery. That'd be horrible. Sincerely, Austin.
I need to know if you made it. I need to know. Just taser. I need to check real quick. I'm on 33rd video. He didn't do it. He didn't do it.
From the moment it leaves the factory, critical parts of your...
Get back on air. Give me this video back. How do I go back on this? No, I'll click on an ad.
Your engine are building up deposits.
Full screen.
And at Valvoline, preventing the...
Hi, I'm going to show you how to design a taser, but under...
Okay, hold up. There's a whole lot going on. I clicked on another ad. Stop.
Hello once again, Theory.
Got it back. Or is that this one?
Ready for a huge special announcement? Jeez. Me, Markiplier, Doggo, the kings of Five Nights at Freddy's, together in one room against a brand new FNAF game
Doggo
with thousands of dollars at stake, live. Do I have your attention? Great! Because it's happening right here on the channel, December 3rd. Mark your team of Dawko and Markiplier to help me out, taking that money out of Scott's pockets and putting it in the hands of people who are working to cure kids and kill cancer. It's gonna be a crazy event, so please mark your calendars, December 3rd, 10 o'clock a.m. California time, and going literally all day here on this channel, on the Game Theorist channel. And if you do want to start donating now to this incredible cause, the link is right here on the video. Yeah. What's that series? How to Make FNAF Not Scary?
I love those videos.
Well, guess what? You can help make cancer not scary by helping the campaign and donating either today or during that big live stream event. Now, enough with me on the couch. Let's get to the episode.
No one suspects anything. It will be fun.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, where today it's time to meet a new villain, because FNAF's next major killer has a face, a voice, a motive, and we even know their name. So today is actually going to be a big one, my friends. The official game may not be releasing until 2020, but we're already well on our way to understanding where this franchise is headed next, just as long as Scott doesn't shred it, burn it, and mix in another 5 monochromatic characters with frontal lobes bit off dreaming on their deathbed.
Doggo, you could have said that in chat, unless it didn't let you, but I don't.
To kill it dead, and then spreading that knowledge and other mental really all day here. Game, I assembled the FNAF Dream Team of Dawko and Markiplier to help me out, taking that money out of Scott's pockets and putting it in the hands of people who are working to cure kids and kill cancer. It's gonna be a crazy event, so please mark your calendar.
This is cure kids and kill cancer, not. What did you say in the Discord? Are you gonna donate to kill kids and cure
Scott's
cancer?
Pockets and putting it in the hands of people who are working to cure kids and kill cancer.
He said to cure kids and kill cancer.
It's gonna be a crazy event, so please mark your calendars, December 3rd, 10 o'clock a.m. California time, and going literally all day here on this channel, on the Game Theorist channel. And if you do want to start donating now to this incredible cause, the link is right here on the video. Yeah. What's that series? How to Make FNAF Not Scary? Well, guess what? You can help make cancer not scary by helping the campaign and donating either today or during that big live stream event. Now,
I am afraid you are forbidden from boarding with
of the masks that we see the bullies wear. Inching your way through FNAF 4's haunted hallways, or just taking a Disney ride that suddenly goes off the rails to revisit a familiar-looking pizzeria, Easter eggs were hidden in every pixel of this DLC. Here's a list of a few that were worth calling out, but don't merit a full-fledged theory. First, the masks that you wear for the trick-or-treat minigame are most likely the real-world versions of the masks that we see the bullies wearing during the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 Bite. This reinforces the idea that in the grand timeline of events, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was popular enough as a franchise by 1983 to have its own line of Halloween masks. In other words, it's more evidence to suggest that this location that we see in FNAF 4 isn't the first pizzeria. It's not the beginning of the timeline. Point number 2, when you win a minigame, you see posters randomly generated around the walls. The thing is, all of these posters have appeared in a previous game, FNAF 6 Pizzeria Simulator. They appear in the alleyways where the salvage animatronics can be found. Manwolf, clown pictures referencing Baby, and Spookfest. What's particularly interesting though is that Spookfest one, which could in fact be referring to the exact fall festival that we're attending. That poster in particular always felt like a random addition to those alleyway scenes, and as we know, Scott don't do coincidences. It's also worth noting that I've seen one playthrough from the channel Johnny Blocks that had 3 clown pictures appear on the walls. After throwing a dart at each one, the barn suddenly switched over to rave mode. Black lights on for the party. party becoming possessed by Golden Freddy. We can tell that as evidenced by the It's Me banner hanging over the top of the barn. Now, I can't confirm whether this is real because he's the only playthrough I've seen been able to do this, and also spawning 3 clown pictures randomly is just seemingly impossible odds. And also, it strikes me as weird because from a lore perspective, Golden Freddy at this point should be hanging out in the afterlife with our dearly departed William Afton. But still, it is something that's definitely worth calling out, and if any of you out there have a means of testing it, go forth and double check it. And lastly, during the game over screen, you see a giant dread bear looming over top of the hillside covered in gravestones. On top of the hill, you can make out what appears to be some sort of purple glitch. By hacking outside the bounds of the game, just like the channel Kuno Leo did, you can see that it's indeed a glitching gravestone, surrounded on all sides by 7 normal-looking gravestones. Now, 6 gravestones would seem to be a reference to Pizzeria Simulator's gravestone ending, symbolic of the 5 murdered children during the missing children's incident, as well as Charlie, the girl who dies and goes on to possess the puppet. In short, William Afton's 6 victims. But then, what's a 7th gravestone doing there? Well, in my estimation, that one would seem to belong to Michael Afton, his son and his final and unintentional victim. Which would suggest that the glitching gravestone is William Afton's grave. It's got the purple color, it's got itself the glitch, which clearly ties it to Glitch Trap, but further cementing this is the texture that you see running along the grave, which, while hard to make out, clearly has rabbit ears. But it's the last and hardest to achieve Easter egg that I want to focus on today. The one that reveals our new killer and starts setting up the story that we'll be watching play out over the next few years of games. You see, William Afton has started himself a cult. Let's call it the Cult of Glitch Trap, and it's gonna be our job to rescue the people who've fallen under his spell. Now, if you've been watching over the last few FNAF episodes, I've been talking a lot about how FNAF VR Help Wanted is a passing of the torch, a sort of reboot for the series, an ushering in of the next generation of stories that this franchise wants to tell. Stories that, yes, still come from the series' murdery past, but also move beyond it, beyond the timelines, beyond all its baggage, now with new faces and new murder to be done. And the Curse of Dreadbear DLC confirms that theory. Yeah, ring the bell, my friends. That's right, I got a FNAF theory correct. The largest, longest, and quite frankly hardest minigame of the DLC pack is called Corn Maze, which has Dayglow Foxy hunting you down as you search for keys in an abandoned maze filled with what are truly the scariest part of the game, really loud crows. Oh, no! Whoa, what the heck was that? Oh my lordy. Sure, you can find 1 key and escape, but if you manage to survive to find all 4 keys, suddenly a 5th key spawns in the arena, purple and glitching, which should already cue you in on what's coming. This 5th key unlocks a cellar located at the middle of the maze, one that resembles our prize barn, except now it's all torn up, looking like it's been slowly laid to waste with time. But there's a sinister gift waiting for us on the table, a white bunny mask with a fleshy, almost bloody interior. We put it on and our breathing slows. We calm down. Our character is suddenly at peace. But there's more. Back in the prize counter, we suddenly have the option of wearing the mask again. Putting just the mask on doesn't do anything except obstruct your vision because masks suck. But if you put it on while holding Glitch Trap, suddenly someone, a woman, starts to speak.
Yes, I hear you. I know. No, there's no miscommunication. I understand. Yes, I have it. I made it myself. I think you would like it. No one suspects anything. Don't worry. I'll be ready, and I won't let you down. It will be fun.
A woman having a sinister one-way conversation with someone, or something. I don't think I need to spell this one out for you, right? She is clearly talking to William. Glitch Trap. The fact that this conversation requires you to be wearing the mask, which represents her, and holding the rabbit, which represents him, seems to be all the proof that we would need. But now let's look at specifically what they're saying. Based on her saying things like, yes, I have it, I made it myself, you would like it, she seems to be referring to the bunny mask. That is her creation. The voice, William, clearly clearly dictated to her that she needed to create some sort of bunny mask to carry on his tradition of Lapin-themed murder. The line, "no one suspects anything," clearly seems to indicate that she's been hiding in plain sight, much like a pizzeria's security guard who's planning to kidnap kids. Or, as I brought up in a previous theory, a game tester who's suddenly been brainwashed by a rogue piece of malware. Which leads us to the other lines about there being no miscommunication, being ready, and not letting him down. Those all seem to indicate that William senses hesitation or fear in the woman about fulfilling on his plan. This is reinforced by the name of this voiced character. On Scott's Voices.com page, where he tends to hire out actors for their various roles in the game, the listing was named Reluctant Follower. So this woman is clearly a devotee of Afton, but she's hesitant. I mean, going so far as to actually kidnap kids and, you know, turn them into remnant soup or something is a lot to ask of anyone, honestly. It's also important to note here that the word reluctant doesn't necessarily mean unwilling. I mean, it can, certainly, but in this case, it seems like she's trying to please her master, William Afton, saying things like, "I think you would like it," and convincing herself that this will be fun. It's not that William has control over her body and is forcing her to do things, she's just nervous to take that final leap. What this all tells us is that William has been successful in what Tape Girl warned us about, that FNAF VR is a Trojan horse. It's carrying the virus that is William Afton. Now, whether that's him as code or AI or it's just his spirit being passed along isn't really important. What matters is that he's suddenly able to enter the minds of its testers. It's why we hear the story of Jeremy throughout those FNAF VR tapes, a man who went crazy and ultimately sliced off his own face. He was probably starting to slip under the control of Glitch Trap, but tried his best to fight back in whatever way he could. That's also why every ending of that game is a bad one. The fact that we need the green bunny to hear this dialogue confirms that all those vague cutscenes at the end of the game are of him escaping. Because without the tapes, Glitch Trap is still disassembled in the game, and this dialogue of a brainwashed devotee isn't possible. But what we're also learning here is that while Glitch Trap is able to invade the mind of a person, he can't fully possess their body. He's limited to only being a voice inside their head. He has to convince them to do his bidding and continue to push them to fulfill their mission. Mask Girl is scared, she's hesitant, she's reluctant, and must be cajoled into acting on William's wishes. She's slowly descending into madness. And wait a minute, why does that sound so familiar? Oh yeah, because it's one of the upcoming projects that Scott's been teasing for the better part of the last year. It's a pretty accurate title for a game where your villain starts as a normal game tester, but then is forced to listen to the voice in her head telling her to kill. It's also worth noting that there's a similar conversation currently hidden in the source code of Scott's website, except here we actually see both sides of the conversation.
Stay the course.
I will.
Focus on my voice.
I will.
Don't let anyone lead you astray.
I won't.
Have you selected one?
I have.
That line of "don't let anyone lead you astray" really stands out. Again, reinforcing this idea that the followers aren't fully under Afton's control, that they can be swayed or saved in some way, just like people in a real cult. It looks like we might be able to save these innocents from Afton's grasp before they commit any sorts of crime this time. And where will those crimes be happening? Well, a few weeks ago, this was the image on Scott's website. Just more cool 80s-tastic FNAF teasers for the new game that's coming out in 2020. But when the full Dreadbear DLC was released, the image got altered slightly to this. Notice those floppy ears? Looks like our new killer might be on the hunt in the mall. Looks like 2020 found itself a new female FNAF killer. And if she's truly working undercover with no one suspecting anything, clearly she must be a mall cop, segueing to a murder scene near Spencer's Gifts. And I would end it there, except we can also figure out her name. Brightening images, digging through source code, that is so FNAF 1.0. At this point, the series is 5 years old. It's matured, and the fan base has matured, and the way that we're able, and perhaps even expected, to dig for clues has gotten significantly more advanced. It's like an arms race. Scott finds a new way to hide clues, one person in the community breaks the code, and suddenly it's in our tool belt. Next time he releases something, boom, we immediately whip that tool out. That's how...
Dog, can you believe that FNAF is less than a month away from being 10 years old? Like 14 days away from being 10 days old, or 10 years old. That's crazy.
Sounded wrong. Maybe let's not whip out our tools and instead smartly and respectfully remove that tool from our tool belt and apply it to the problem at hand. Let me give you an example of this. Brightening images. The first 1 or 2 times Scott did this, it was completely unique. No developer had ever really done anything like that before, and as a result, it took a little while to discover his hidden messages. But after 1 or 2 times, now we know it's a trick he can use, so no one even bothers to look at the image itself. It's just straight into those contrast sliders. The same thing with looking at source code, the same thing with digging through game files, and on, with each one slightly more complicated than the last. And now we've unlocked ourselves a brand new clue finding technique. In the source code for Scott's site, the shadow image and its previous form were both named the same thing, 7_1. FNAF 7 Teaser 1, nothing too exciting there. But that's only the name that Scott wants us to see. You see, I learned a lot from making an ARG over the last year, and one of the biggest tricks was that images can be opened as text files using a program like Notepad, and that the text often reveals a lot of secrets about the history of a given image. Like here, if I open up a JPEG of one of our Minecraft thumbnails, you can see that it was saved using Adobe Photoshop, even down to the specific version. You can even see that there are some text layers here, and what those text layers are called, labeled title, hardwood, and ouchie tree. We're very creative with our layer titles. Anyway, if you open up the first of these 2 Scott Games image files on the site, you see that even though it's called 7_1 in the source code, its original file name was Glamrock Fred Poster. Very cool, eat your heart out Stranger Things in American Horror Story. It's FNAF's turn to revisit the era of big hair and even bigger shoulder pads. So we know in 2020, in this new game, we're going to be introduced to the glam rock animatronics. Very cool, gnarly, totally tubular. No, that was a 90s thing. Wicked, I think, was an 80s thing. Anyway, if you open up the new version of the image, the one with the rabbit shadow, we see that the true name of the file has been changed. It's no longer Glamrock Fred Poster. It now reads Shadow of Vanny. So it would seem that Vanny is the new name of our killer. It's an odd one to be sure, but I honestly don't think that's it. I actually think it's probably a combination of her real name, Vanessa, and her mask, the White Rabbit, or Bunny, Vanessa Bunny, Vanny. Just like Will Trap and Mike Bot and all the other weird ship names.
There is no way he just like instantly just got her name like that.
Names we have in this franchise. Every time. So there you have it, my friends. Preview of the coming events in the FNAF franchise. It's the story of Vanny, Vanessa Bunny, a normal person driven into madness by the voice of William Afton talking to her in her head to go out and kill people. She might be the only one right now, but there could be hundreds out there. A cult of Glitchtrap, if you will, following in his bunny toad footsteps. And we know that this is the case based on the fact that Glitchtrap is still seen dancing in the background of that DLC. He is now apparently able to copy himself. It's worth noting that that's an Easter egg that was left in, actually overwriting an oversized Dreadbear. So you know that this one's intentional, right? It says that Glitchtrap is a copy, and that he's able to copy himself over and over and over again. The cult of Glitchtrap spreads. And now we just have to wait for the next sign of that killer to strike. Maybe it's in the new book series that starts coming out in December. Maybe it's in that new game that Scott's sending us on December 3rd for our big St. Jude charity live stream. Who knows? But in the meantime, stay vigilant, my friends. And remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. Just done. Just done. More FNAF's over. Done until December 3rd. I'm gonna rip my microphone if I jump off this couch. I'm just gonna lower myself slowly. Bye. Well done.
Get the new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 6 and Z Flip 6 with Galaxy AI. Order now with Spectrum free anytime upgrade and get up to $1,000 off. Visit a Spectrum store or SpectrumMobile.com today.
My name is Joe with House to Home, where our mission is to create tailored solutions to homeowners who are looking to sell their properties quickly. I know what it's like to have that lingering stress on your shoulders, and not everyone knows what to do or who to turn to. And if we can be that helping hand to get you out of that situation, then that's our goal. We take the property in as-is condition.
Today we end the torment. 19 books, 11 games, 8 whole years, all leading to this moment. The ultimate FNAF timeline is finally complete. The pieces are in place for us. Now all we have to do is put this story of tragedy, jealousy, and loss together. An hour 30. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that feels like a kid revealed.
Oh, it's not the next one. That's not even the next one. It's from someone else. No, I didn't skip. It got off of the thing. This thing.
Hello once again, theorists. Welcome to Matt.
It stopped playing. It'll play it. So this is the one I just watched. Or this one. I was about to say.
Race you to the ball pit? Hey, that's no fair. I haven't got my shoes off yet.
Into the pit, Spring Boney.
Made it. Ozzy? Ozzy? Oz? Ozzy? Ozzy!
What's his last name? Osborne?
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, and the start to what will undoubtedly be a very FNAF-y new year, because while everyone else in the games industry is concentrated on new consoles with all of the teraflops and none of the actual games, Five Nights at Freddy's is over here in the corner doing its own thing and releasing, you know, exciting and interesting stuff. Last year's Help Wanted was a fantastic addition to the series, which keeps updating itself with new and exciting lore all the time. There's that new 80s inspired game coming out later this year. The AR game is something I should probably talk about at some point, since apparently that also has lore implications. And most interestingly of all, we have ourselves the rollout of a new book series, Fazbear Frights. The first one released after Christmas, and before the end of this year, there'll be a total of, let me check my notes. Holy mother of Ennard, 5? 5 installments in a new book series in a year? Ugh, it looks like Scott's gone back to his roots of just mass releasing stuff. It's like he saw the Netflix model of binge watching a show and was like, I want that, but for video games, and apparently books. Jeez, if only mass dropped lore reveals for us to binge understand, we'd all be happier for it. Anyway, the reason I call these books out is that, first off, they're just really good. You ever read the Goosebumps books? I definitely did. Every single one. Night of the Living Dummy and Ghost Next Door every day, fam. Well, Fazbear Frights is just a modern version of those, with each book containing 3 short horror stories all set within the FNAF universe. And true to them being a part of the franchise, they aren't afraid to get super bleak. Today's episode is going to go into detail for the first 3, so if you want to read them blind, consider this your spoiler warning. Anyway, to give you a sense of tone, one story ends with a girl finding her severed body parts hidden away in plastic bags, only to then realize that she herself has been piece by piece replaced with a robotic body. In another, a teenage girl's imprisoned and forced to choose the way in which she is gonna die, with options ranging from boiling alive to electrocution to decapitation. She chooses the decap attack. Dear FNAF tubers, I know we were all super worried about Kappa coming in and striking us down, but when we're covering stories like these, I think we're pretty darn safe. But of course, I wouldn't be talking about all this on Game Theory if it wasn't for the lore. These aren't just random horror stories. Each one is connected back to characters and locations that we know from the original games. The girl who makes a wish to be beautiful and then is unknowingly hacked to pieces? Well, the fairy godmother doing the hacking is a red pigtailed clown robot with green eyes. Does that description sound familiar to anyone? What about the girl who opts for decapitation? Well, I mentioned that she's imprisoned. What I left out was that she's actually trapped in the stomach of a white and pink bear with a twisted sense of humor and a thirst for blood. And if all that's too subtle for you, well, the first story outright has a guy in a golden bunny suit taking us to see 6 murdered kids in the back of a Freddy's Pizzeria in the year 1985. Pretty darn direct, but more on that later. These stories matter because they're giving us more information about how the FNAF universe operates, sometimes in very direct ways, like giving us the exact number of murder victims and the dates of their death, and sometimes in more indirect ways, by showing us that this is a canon where a girl can be rebuilt day by day, piece by piece as a human-robot hybrid so realistic that no one, not even herself, realizes it. And so that is what we're covering today. What these stories show us about the FNAF universe, what they confirm, and also also what important new details they unlock. Plus, they open up a big theory about the games, one that I actually got wrong late last year, and I'm very excited about now. So with all that said, reader beware, you're in for a scare. Oh, and for those of you who've dismissed the stories as non-canon, I wouldn't be too quick to judge these books. Each one of them has this in its official description, quote, "In this volume, horror master Scott Cawthon spins 3 sinister novella-length stories from different corners of his series' canon," end quote. Different corners of the canon, you say? Sounds to me like some stories are going to be more aligned with the trilogy of books, some more so with the canon of the games, but still, all of them existing within the canon itself, so absolutely worth our time to investigate. The first story actually has a lot to cover, so I'm gonna just save that one for last and instead start with the second, To Be Beautiful. In it, Sarah, a 14-year-old girl, rescues a red pigtailed clown animatronic from the trunk of a car that she finds in a scrapyard. Grateful to be saved, the robot, who calls herself Eleanor, but is probably better described as Giraffe Baby based on the cut illustrations from the book, says that she'll grant any wish. Sarah wishes to be beautiful, and Baby, like a twisted fairy godmother, makes it happen by putting Sarah to sleep every night and hacking off sections of her body while she's unconscious, replacing them with robotic junk. Quote, "Sarah looked at the floor. One bag contained a human leg, another a human arm. Blood pooled in the bottoms of the bags, but the limbs had been severed neatly, as if in a surgical amputation. Another bag, stuffed with bloody snake-like entrails and what appeared to be a liver, slid from the cabinet's shelf and landed on the floor with a wet splat. Hey, if pizzerias never work out for you, baby, Beverly Hills plastic surgeon is a great backup career. The only stipulation is that Sarah must wear a special necklace to keep the illusion alive. When the necklace inevitably falls off, Sarah's new junk body is exposed and falls apart. She dies, surrounded by her own severed body parts as she's forced to watch Baby walk out into the world having stolen her old look and identity." Quote again, "I made your wish come true, Sarah, and in return," Eleanor laughed again. She jerked and shook, her silver finish turning the pinkish shade of Caucasian skin. In a matter of moments, she was a dead ringer for Sarah. Well, you certainly made my wishes come true. Great story to read to the kids at night, by the way. Good night, sleep tight, don't let the shape-shifting robot slice off your face and steal it. Anyway, as I mentioned before, Sarah's extreme makeover confirms that in the FNAF canon, humans can be partly or fully robotic without ever knowing it. We've seen it before in the original trilogy of books, where the fourth closet revealed that protagonist Charlie was a highly advanced robot, and we're seeing it again happen here. A normal human Sarah unknowingly being remade into a robot. The fact that this is now a recurring element of the series goes to support the idea that Michael, the crying child of FNAF 4, after getting bitten, could have been put back together in a much more literal way than any of us were expecting all those years ago. He was put together as a machine. He grew up without knowing it and was only able to figure it all out once he miraculously survived being scooped at the end of Sister Location.
But something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not.
Does this little short story outright confirm any of it? No, certainly not, but third time is a charm, Michael. The third story about a girl named Millie trapped inside Funtime Freddy's stomach doesn't really tell us a whole lot, but instead it just confirms what we already suspected, that the Funtime robots were designed to be large enough to capture kids and either kill them off or transport them to underground testing facilities. Moving on to the end of the book, there's a little teaser, like a Marvel movie but with 100% less Nick Fury, where we get a preview of a seemingly new monster. Two cops are discussing a hooded figure raiding the neighborhood's dumpsters. They call it the Stitch Wraith. Quote, "The Stitch Wraith," witnesses said, was a shrouded figure in some sort of cloak. The detective squinted at a picture that showed the figure pulling what seemed to be a mannequin's torso from the dumpster. The face wasn't a face. Not a human face, anyway. It looked more like a mask. The face was round, and its features were drawn onto the curved white surface. It had dark eyes, one of which looked blackened. Were those blood stains around the mouth? End quote. To me, the Stitch Wraith is just a cooler name for Ennard. I mean, you got yourself a creature that has a white mask with a missing blacked out eye, sharp, potentially bloody teeth, and a lurching walk. Definitely similar to the way that he's shown in the games. Ennard's obsession with trash would also be appropriate for the Stitch Wraith. I mean, it's just a mass of wires. It needs something like a mannequin torso to give it form. We actually see the same thing with Scrap Baby's design from FNAF 6. Between games, she clearly assimilated any and all garbage into her form to be...
Wasn't there one form of Ennard that was his actual, like, full body? I don't know where. I feel like I've seen it before, but I don't know where from. I don't think it was in the game.
more passable and human.
That's
to me,
true.
I gotta be honest, I just think the Stitch Wraith story is cool because it shows the outside world's reaction to the Freddy creatures that we all know. It starts to show what happened to him after the events of the game. It connects the dots for the story after the credits finish rolling. To know that Ennard, after he escapes from Sister Location, to the in-universe people going about their daily lives is just this urban legend named the Stitch Wraith. I guess that's just pretty interesting to me. I think it's fun. Anyway, it's also worth noting here that the teaser attributes 5 dead bodies to Ennard. Quote, 5 withered bodies with eyes that bled black down the sides of the face, end quote. So it appears that Ennard, after leaving Michael's body, tried to skin suit 5 or so other people. Notice that it says withered bodies. These are bodies that have clearly decayed, just like we saw with Michael's at the end of Sister Location. And the mode of death, them crying black, it's just the body leaking oil as Ennard needs to go and find another skin suit to possess. So that's pretty much everything else. But what I really want to focus on now and in a follow-up mini-theory is the first story of this bunch. The story where the book gets its name, Into the Pit. In it, a video game-loving, anime-obsessed 10-year-old boy named Oswald is forced to spend most of his summer in an old, run-down restaurant named Jeff's Pizza. One day, wanting to pull a prank on his father, he finds himself in a, wait for this, time-traveling ball pit that takes him to 1985, the day where 6 murders have just happened at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Quote, when the smell of pizza hit Oswald's nose, he understood. He was still in Jeff's Pizza, or more accurately, what Jeff's Pizza had been before Jeff took over. The ball pit was new and not roped off. On the wall was a mural of the same characters performing on stage, the brown bear, the blue rabbit, and the bird girl. Below their faces were the words Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He even caught sight of a calendar hanging in an open office that helped him pinpoint the date, 1985, end quote. Way to take the mystery out of it there, guys. I was all ready to cross-reference all the arcade cabinets that you saw in the pizzeria and the allusions to the Smurfs and other popular media at the time to find the date, but you just had to go and take that all away from me. Thanks for saving me the research, I guess, but no thanks for taking away my deserving YouTube watch minutes. And here's the first big mind blow of this book series. First, because I think there are actually 2 in this one story. In this story, we get ourselves clear, indisputable evidence that in 1985, 6 kids were killed. Quote, the rabbit stopped in front of a door with a sign reading party room. Half a dozen kids, none of them older than Oswald, their lifeless bodies propped into sitting positions, their legs stretched out in front of them. They were all wearing Freddy Fazbear birthday party hats. Oswald couldn't tell how they died, but he knew the rabbit was responsible for it, that the rabbit had wanted him to see his handiwork, end quote. On one hand, it's incredible to finally get ourselves a date and a firm number of dead children. But get ready to change your Facebook status because it is complicated. You see, 1985 has never once been an important date in the series. 1983? Absolutely, that's FNAF 4. 1987? You betcha, that's FNAF 2. We've got ourselves 80s representation everywhere. Mullets and Oingo Boingo for days, but never, not once has there ever been a mention of 1985. And while it might be easy to immediately write that off as a typo or some non-canon event, it's definitely not. Far from it. In fact, for as wacko as it seems, this time-traveling ball pit from a short story and a spin-off series of books takes Oswald back to a pizzeria that we've never seen before, but one that we have absolutely known to have existed since the second game in this series. As proof, let me pull up a clip from my second ever episode on FNAF, back when Purple Guy was actually Phone Guy. Ugh, those were the days. Every Way to Sunday, this game is a prequel. Posters everywhere in Five Nights 2 welcome you to this new location, implying that there was another Freddy Fazbear's Pizza somewhere before this one. Additionally, the Phone Guy makes reference to it on night 1, mentioning the old location and how it was left to rot. So let me recap. There's the restaurant from the first game, which is the last in the timeline. The one that you're currently working at in 1987 in Five Nights 2, an older location of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria left to rot, and the original Fredbear's Diner. In FNAF 2, we're presented with newspaper clippings that outright says that this location is having a grand reopening. But we knew, even way back then, 5 years ago, that the events of FNAF 1 took place after FNAF 2. It was a prequel sequel, so there had to have been a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that existed prior to FNAF 2 that got the franchise shut down in the first place. We also know that it wasn't Fredbear's Family Diner because Phone Guy calls that restaurant out separately.
Hello and welcome to your new summer job at the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that.
So in this one random little scene from Fazbear Frights, we uncover a pivotal piece of the timeline that's been missing for the last 5 years. A mystery pizzeria that's been gone since the very beginning of this franchise. A pizzeria that looks to be home to the first 6 actual murders of the Fazbear story. In fact, I can actually do you one better. I believe this to be the 6 dead kids that we end up reuniting in the Happiest Day minigame from FNAF 3. Notice that detail about all of them wearing party hats. These were kids all taken from the same party. And the Happiest Day minigame from FNAF 3 has us reuniting them to finally finish the birthday party they got prematurely and gruesomely cut short. This is huge information here, guys! However, true to form, as it always is with this story, not everything lines up. With this being chronologically the earliest set of murders that we see at a pizzeria set before 1987, then we should be seeing the animatronics get possessed here. It's something that we've never actually seen in the games. This should be the missing children's incident, where the victims' bodies are shoved into the suits never to be found. But it's clearly not. The book makes it very obvious that these bodies were clearly out and visible. Quote again, there were noises, but not the usual ones of Freddy Fazbear's. Screams, crying children, yells for help, chaos. Oswald's stomach in knots, he moved through the crowd, past crying mothers running with their toddlers in their arms, past dads grasping children's hands and leading them swiftly towards the exit, their faces masks of shock, end quote. The bunny had laid out all his victims for everyone to see, a far cry from the bodies being shoved into the suits and then not being discovered for years on end, hence the missing children's incident. And we know that the missing children's incident is most likely where the animatronics got possessed because, you know, their bodies are in the suits, along with the metal, and so the metal and the souls fuse together to create living animatronics, roll into FNAF 2 1987, oh my gosh, look, there's living animatronics roaming around this pizzeria. Oh, and we installed security devices just because we know a murderer came around the last time. There's a reason I stopped talking about the timeline of these things. Additionally, there are 6 children dead, when the missing children's incident only had itself 5. That, in and of itself, would be okay, right? Since FNAF 6, 6 children has always been the magic number. It's weird to mention a magic number when talking about murdered children, but you know what? This series desensitizes you to a lot. Our list is Susie, Fritz, Gabriel, Jeremy, Cassidy, and Charlotte. The core 4 animatronics, Golden Freddy, and the puppet. 6. The problem is, Charlotte the puppet always seems to have a separate death outside of the building, outside of the realm of the other 5 children. So having her suddenly lined up with all the rest of the kids at the same time just doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. I don't know, maybe I just need to think on it more because everything else lines up. We have ourselves a golden bunny leading kids down a hallway into a back room, just like those original newspaper clippings described. He's also very clearly visible, which means he'd likely be taken into custody. Again, just like those original newspaper clippings describe. As it always is with the series, so many items line up, but there's just 1 or 2 little details, little sticking points that make the pieces fit a little awkwardly. I honestly think, though, that this isn't the last time that we're going to be seeing this pizzeria. Remember earlier when I mentioned that new FNAF game that's coming out in 2020, a little bit later this year, probably titled Into Madness? Well, that one is set in a mall with a very 80s theme. Again, we've been talking about the Rockstar animatronics for a couple episodes now, and that's the one where they get revealed. It wouldn't be surprising for me to see that game be the one where we finally step foot inside the first ever Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria and witness all the events that Oswald just saw for ourselves. So there you have it, my friends, the first major and a couple of minor reveals that this installment had in store for us. However, there is one final mystery that this story might help us solve. Not only does it give us a new set of murders to think about, crimes that are now chronologically the earliest that we see in the timeline, but also Into the Pit may just be giving us the identity of the person behind all of this. I don't mean behind the child murders. I mean the mystery of the man behind the games. What do I mean by that? And what evidence do I have to prove it? Well, that, my friends, is a theory unto itself for next week. So in the meantime, subscribe, ring the bell, and most importantly, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I know these FNAF episodes tend to dive pretty deep sometimes, but even after all the games and books and shades of purple, I gotta say I still find them fun.
If you've been getting scam texts like these, it was me. I said that probably means your data's been leaked, and I have all of it.
He drawn Freddy. Why he slow down?
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, where today we continue our analysis of FNAF's newly released ghost stories, the Fazbear Frights. Last week we covered the majority of this book's key reveals, including the massive bombshell where we visit what is chronologically the earliest Freddy Fazbear's Pizza we've yet seen, a location that we have never visited before in any of this series canon, but one that we know to have existed somewhere in the background since the release of FNAF 2. With 6 murders set in 1985, it makes it very likely that this was the mystery location to have closed down the franchise before its grand reopening 2 years later in 1987. And that, loyal theorists, is why I scrounged through every scrap of FNAF content out there, and like entered the Stitch Wraith over here. Scott throws out ideas and I'm just digging through his dumpster hoping to cobble it all together into a workable body theory thing. Whatever. As that silly children's workbook taught me years ago, some of the biggest lore reveals in this franchise can happen in the unlikeliest of places. Yeah, we're gonna reveal Golden Freddy's name in this children's workbook word search. Fantastic. Yay! Actually, it was fantastic. I thought it was a brilliant way to do it. That said, I will not forgive dabbing Chica. Never. Truly a cursed image. But you see, I think there was one other massive lore reveal hidden in Fazbear Frights, buried amongst the tales of Extreme Makeover, Robot Edition, and Ball Pit Time Machine. A lore reveal that is absolutely worth our time exploring today. A lore reveal that introduces us to a character who's been helping to pull the strings since the very beginning. One who's been misleading us about the horrors of Fazbear Entertainment. Someone whose importance goes far beyond just the 40 pages he appears in throughout this book. I think Into the Pit may have just introduced us to the creator of these games. And I'm not talking about Scott Cawthon. Let me explain. One of the strangest inclusions in FNAF VR Help Wanted was a reference to a game designer that was telling lies about the horrors happening at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
We know that Fazbear Entertainment has developed something of a bad reputation over the last few decades. And while it's true that some stories associated with our name were loosely based on actual events, the majority of them were total fabrications from the mind of a complete lunatic. Lawsuits pending.
And yes, that sweet, sweet piece of man candy that you see there is Scott Cawthon himself. Okay, fine, haha, funny joke there, Scott. I mean, this series likes to get self-aware. We're all familiar with that. And for a mainline title in the series, this one felt pretty extreme, but fine, cool with it. And then you keep playing the game, and what started as a one-off tongue-in-cheek joke actually becomes a critical piece of the lore.
They lied to us. They lied to all of us. They told us that the whole point of this VR game was to undo the bad PR done by a rogue indie game developer who supposedly made up a bunch of crazy stories that tarnished the brand.
But it doesn't stop there. There's more twists in FNAF VR than there is in a typical M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Fazbear Entertainment hired the game developer. Those indie games were designed to conceal and make light of what happened. This isn't just an attempt to rebrand. It's an elaborate cover-up.
The whole thing starts with like, oh, this game designer is a joke. Psych! No, he's not. He's actually critical to the lore and is exposing the crimes happening at these restaurants. Booyah, fooled you again. He's actually one of the villains. When the dust actually settles on this plot development, what we're left with is a game designer looking like Scott Cawthon, hired by Fazbear Entertainment to make indie games, the games that we've all been playing up to this point, in order to misdirect us away from the real lore of the story. So of course, I did an episode all about how Scott Cawthon is the villain of FNAF. Let me rephrase what we just heard. Scott is one of the bad guys. He was lying to us. If FNAF VR's tapes are to be believed, pretty much everything we know from the first 3, at least, but maybe even 4, 5, heck, 6 games, could all be thrown out as complete fabrications created by Scott Cawthon for the sole reason because he was paid off by Fazbear Entertainment. Except I was wrong. Nothing new to be sure, but here, my timing couldn't have been any worse. You see, earlier that very week that I uploaded that video, Scott made a post on Reddit saying that the indie game developer from FNAF VR isn't him. Here's what he had to say, quote, "The question is this, is Scott Cawthon now a part of FNAF lore? The short answer is no. Yes, I used my own picture for this indie developer because it's an obvious parallel, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually me in universe." End quote. Yeah, Scott, you remain vague and mysterious about the lore for years, half a decade at this point. And this one little detail is the thing that you want to clarify. And you just choose to do it right before my video on this very topic, which, while it is honestly still a perfectly valid theory, gets everyone to dismiss all of the findings for that entire theory since it's the one small detail that I get wrong and everyone focuses on. I don't have feelings about any of that at all. Scott continues, quote again. So no, I'm not canon. Only the existence of a game developer that supposedly made video games based on actual events that may or may not be a cover-up by Fazbear Entertainment is canon. Keep in mind that I do tend to use pictures of me and my family in the games, just because they're so readily available. In FNAF 4, I used a picture of a mountain range that I took while I was a truck driver in West Texas. I used a picture of a snowman that me and my older sons made together. I used a picture of a pet mockingbird that we nursed back to health one year. Do these have lore significance? Well, you probably already know the answer, end quote. Oh, I know the answer, Scott. And that answer is yes. You breathe and it becomes canon. My ever-decreasing sanity aside, it does leave open the door as to the identity of who this rogue indie developer is. And I think that Fazbear Frights' story Into the Pit reveals to us who it might actually be. Admittedly, this is a bit looser of a theory, but I think it's one worth discussing. I believe our secret game designer, the one who's been lying to us through these games, is the story's main character, Oswald, the little 10-year-old boy who winds up in a time-traveling ball pit to visit the 1985 murder scene of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I believe he grows up to be hired on by Fazbear Entertainment to create these games. Now, that might seem like a stretch for a character that we only get to know in the span of 40 pages, but holy Ballora, is there a lot of evidence in those 40 pages to back that assertion up. Shortly into his story, Oswald is shown to be obsessed with animatronics for no apparent reason. Quote from the book, he didn't know why, but lately he'd been drawing mechanical animals, bears, bunnies, and birds. He imagined them being human-sized and moving with the jerkiness of robots in an old science fiction movie. Sometimes he drew the animals' exposed metal skeletons or sketched them with the fur peeled back. It was a creepy effect, like seeing a person's skull peeking out from beneath the skin.
This dude also acts weird. Oops.
End quote. Now mind you, this is without him ever having a connection to animatronics. Heck, he doesn't have a connection to the pizzeria at this point in the story. He has never been there. Nothing. This is just him naturally choosing to draw these oddly specific things without any outside references or influences. So already this boy seems to have himself a strange connection to the FNAF lore, or is just a psychopath in training, but there's more. For such a short story, Into the Pit takes a lot of time to establish Oswald as a fan of video games, B-grade Japanese movies, and manga. A lot of time for a 40-page story. We hear about him listening to video game soundtracks. We witness the debates that he has with his father over cheesy Toho-style Godzilla monsters. How funny he finds the actors' lips not matching up with the dubbed-in words in those sorts of movies. He visits the library and we hear about his enthusiasm for the latest manga installment. Now, the connection to video games is pretty obvious here, right? If he likes video games, well, there's a chance that he'd want to grow up to be a designer of video games himself. But it's his connection to old, cheesy Japanese films and manga that really got my gears turning. Think back to Ultimate Custom Night. At various point thresholds in that game, you would unlock the Bear of Vengeance cutscenes, each one clearly inspired by those old, poorly dubbed Japanese samurai movies, the art style clearly riffing on classic anime and manga animations. The mysterious designer of the FNAF games, who presumably made Ultimate Custom Night, would need to be a fan of this style of storytelling to want to incorporate it into his work. And here we have ourselves Oswald, a person who exists in this universe, whose limited characterization is spent establishing him as a fan of exactly this type of storytelling. Speaking of limited characterization, it's a minor connection, but a key point of the story is how money-strapped Ozzy and his family are. The reason he spends so much of his time in the library and the pizzeria is that they're both cheap forms of entertainment during the day, while his family works over the summer. If Oswald were to grow up and end up designing the FNAF games, well, it would actually be a somewhat similar story arc to Scott Cawthon himself. As his story goes, Scott was a struggling game designer. He was making minimum wage during the day as a Dollar General store clerk and working on his games at night, with none of them going anywhere, many of them being poorly received. The first Freddy's game was the one where all of his years of hardworking grinding finally paid off. There's obviously a lot more to that story, but suffice it to say, Oswald seems to be a character after Scott's own heart, coming from modest means, a fan of nerd culture. So to see Ozzy be the in-universe programmer of these games, to be Scott's literal in-universe stand-in for himself, well, it doesn't seem like that much of a stretch. But okay, saying our designer was this kid who draws spooky animatronics, comes from a low to modest income family, a story similar to Scott, and likes video games and anime is still a bit of a stretch, right? Describes like 90% of kids. Okay, well, maybe not all kids have a psychic connection with a decades-old murder restaurant, but the rest of it, sure, pretty generic kid. Here's the thing though, we're not just talking about Oswald's character traits here. If you look at Ozzy's experience with the Fazbear restaurant in this story, you could see where he'd be inspired to include certain game elements that we ourselves have played through. The first and most obvious is Jeff, the current owner of Jeff's Pizzeria, the pizzeria that took over the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's in Oswald's time. He's described in the book like this, quote, "Jeff was creepy too. He looked 100 years old, but was probably just 30. With those heavy-lidded, bloodshot eyes, the stained apron, and the slow speech and movement, he was like a zombie pizza chef," end quote. Slow movements, bloodshot eyes, zombie pizza chef with a red-stained apron. It sounds like it could very well be the inspiration behind an undead murderer in a pizzeria who refuses to die, or a walking purple zombie that haunts the streets of the town. Remember, the game designer hired on by Fazbear Entertainment was tasked to lie about and make light of the murders in the Freddy restaurants. So what we see in the games would likely be a mix of reality and fiction. Oswald could very well be pulling from his real-life experiences. I mean, the names of people Oswald encounters also have themselves an uncanny similarity to what we see in the games. Ozzy's best friend from the past is named Mike. A Mike who outright says this, quote, "You know, when I was little, I loved Freddy Fazbear's band. I even had a stuffed Freddy I used to sleep with," end quote. Oh, sorry, that's the lore connection alarm. It goes off anytime someone makes a conversation. Mike also reveals that he has himself a sister. Sorry again. And then they also talk about how creepy clowns and dolls are. Apologies, that's my other alarm. That's the sister location.
Quickly, I just want to say how a couple videos ago, MapPad was talking about how Scott said how these books could be with 4 different things, and MapPad was just saying it was just from a different visual point. But like one of the other options where it could be a different universe, where, you know,
revelation
stuff
alarm.
like this.
Anyway, it doesn't seem to be Mike Afton or Mike Emily. Oh, you can bet I checked into that one. But these conversations could certainly have inspired Oswald to make a character named Mike, who lives and loves the Freddy Fazbear franchise, who has himself a favorite Freddy plush, who has a sister who loves dolls and becomes a really creepy clown doll hybrid who commands an army of dolls herself. Later in the book, Oswald meets a girl named Gabrielle, who loves Greek myth and gives him the courage to fight back against Golden Bonnie. Gabrielle is a very random character, but one with, again, a very important name. One that is, once again, shockingly similar to one of the kids that we find on our gravestone, Gabriel. Even the theme of this short story could have inspired Oswald's games. You see, after Oswald uncovers the 1985 murders, his dad gets sucked into the time travel pit by Golden Bonnie. And not just sucked in, he's replaced. Suddenly, everywhere his dad should be, Ozzy instead sees the silent, staring Golden Bonnie stalking him, watching him. Ozzy is the only one who sees it too. Everyone else just sees his father like normal. Actually a really creepy, disturbing piece of imagery. One that gets Ozzy to question his own sanity. But it's also one that directly ties back to the core motif of the games. A father, William Afton, becoming a golden bunny to terrorize kids, including his own son. A son who then has to go out, seek, and ultimately rescue his father in order to end the nightmare. And then you just have random lines inserted into the story story that kind of fit but kind of don't, but are also oddly specific to key moments throughout the FNAF franchise, like this, quote, "Every day you toss me out on the street like garbage," end quote, which are reminiscent of the FNAF 6 salvage minigames, with animatronics literally being thrown out on the street. This line, as Ozzy says it in the context of the scene, is kind of awkward, but if you're looking at it through the lens of, hey, this is actually a lore connection back to the games, now all of a sudden, it fits perfectly. There are just so many details that line up between Oswald's character, the people he meets, and the things that he goes through that line up with someone who could have made the FNAF games, who could have concocted parts and pieces of this story. Even motive-wise, it makes sense. Maybe Fazbear hires him on because they know he knows the truth, and it's to get him to shut up. Maybe Ozzy accepts the money because A, he's poor, and B, he's scared. He knows what they can do to him. I mean, will any of this ever come into play in any way, shape, or form? Unclear, probably not, but one, it actually may be able to help us better separate out the truth from the fiction in the early games of this franchise. Like knowing zombie people were inspired by Jeff, the owner of Jeff's Pizzeria, the zombie guy, may take all of that information off the table and really let us focus in on what truly matters, a specific subset of murders. But even if it doesn't do anything grandiose like that too, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing Oswald again at some point. I mean, already there's a new teaser for the next installment of Fazbear Fright, Fetch, up on Scott's website, so you can bet that we're gonna have a lot more to say about this series and its connections with the games in the coming months. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Oh, I don't think we're gonna see more of Oswald. Maybe we will. I don't know. Jeez. I gotta wonder what he has to say about these. Also, you'll see, like, I've seen. Maybe I have watched this. I don't know. There's some that says I've watched, but I was really sleeping when I played it. Is that FNAF AR? No, that's the movie. Yeah, I was sleeping when all this played. So I never actually watched all this. Wait, what was this? Hold on. This was made 4 years ago. When was this one made, real quick?
Top 3 reasons why
4
now's the
years
best
ago.
time to play Honkai Star Rail. Now,
How long was this one made? 2 weeks ago. Oh, 10 months ago, is what I say. Oh wait, that means the other one was 2 weeks ago.
the crying child's name.
This one was 2 weeks ago? Jeez. Can't see chat right now. Oh, that's a... Why is it like that?
Warning, this episode contains bright flashing
Why is it a YouTube original? Yeah, top.
lights in order to increase the spoopiness levels. Consider yourself warned.
Hold up. Can you survive? Oh. So does this one have, like... Does this one have lore in it? Because... Retired? Yeah, I was thinking... Skip this one, because it's just him playing in real life.
Oh, sup? Leave now, please. Oh, the light went out. Sup?
Dude.
Oh, sup?
What is that? I know it's not a theory, it's just like them playing FNAF and IRL. How does he fail?
Yeah. Finish the lights and
hold on. I'm not making the attack. Alright. Gotta continue 35. Or 38.
Game series.
Stop. What?
Book series.
Help wanted.
New book series.
Oh, come on. Fine. Phone guy.
Phone dude.
Purple guy.
Orange dude.
Didn't you just... Fine. Wild card. Change the category. Timeline.
Bite of 87.
Chomp of 83.
Party of 85.
Wait, but...
Time traveling ball pit.
You can't just...
Reverse.
Oh, yeah? Reverse.
Reverse.
Reverse. Reverse.
Reverse.
Reverse. Reverse.
My bad. I'm gonna stream though. Sorry. I might stream later today. I could do. I was telling you, I could possibly do a stream tonight. Play some horror games tonight or something like that. What do you think, Doggo? Possibly. Put in the Discord if I do. Good. Can you continue for 38 tomorrow? We'll see. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed Doggo, because you have been the only one watching for the past like hour and a half. Everyone come. Yeah, I might do it. But if I do, I'll add everyone in the Discord. And if you can come in, that'd be pretty cool, because I got a couple horror games I want to play. Yeah. See you, Doggo. Hope you enjoyed. Goodbye.